We must stop the terror. Now watch this drive.
Turkey.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. And well, today the GOP civil war rages on. We're going to get into that. And there are some new revelations that don't look so great for Alan Dershowitz in the released Epstein files. We have some emails, some files that we're going to get into, and we're learning about, well, just how close Alan Dershowitz's relationship with Epstein really happened to be. So I can't wait to share the details of that story. Also, remember how the Trump administration was buying, basically parts of various corporations with US taxpayer money, and the whole argument was, well, if these companies grow, well, the American taxpayers get to benefit, which I agree with. Turns out there's also something in it for him as well. So we'll talk a little bit about essentially inflating the bonds, the bond market, and benefiting from inflating it by getting the government to essentially buy debt belonging to various corporations that have been struggling. So we'll get to that as well. But I just want to say it is Thanksgiving Eve, and more than anything, I want to thank my team. I want to thank Kate Bettino, Taylor Ellis, Alyssa Salmons. These are three individuals who work really, really hard on this show, on the production of this show. And of course, on top of that, we have an incredible graphics team, video editors. I would not be able to do this show without all of the people who work so hard on it, day in, day out, without any complaints. So while I sometimes get all sorts of praise from our wonderful, beautiful audience members, and I do always appreciate that, and I do appreciate the constructive feedback as well, I just want to make sure that I'm giving a shout out to the people who also make this show happen. I wouldn't be able to do it without them. I also want to thank one other person today, and that's the loving, wonderful gentleman who watches this show regularly and sends me stuff like this. Art Guy sent me another beautiful painting of my baby boy, Charlie. So thank you. This is again from the Art Guy. He's so talented, and I just feel incredibly fortunate to have the kind of audience we have and to be able to work in the kind of environment I work in. All right, without further ado, let's get into our first story. Recently unveiled Epstein files now prove that Steve Bannon was working on a documentary to essentially paint Jeffrey Epstein in a positive light up until the exact day the pedophile was arrested in 2019. Not a good look. Now remember, we've talked about the fact that Steve Bannon had hours and hours of interview footage with Epstein that for whatever reason he hasn't released. And it appears that the interviews he was doing with Epstein really had to do with a Netflix documentary that was, again, supposed to paint Epstein in a very positive light. So let me give you some more details on that. This revelation, by the way, has led to members of Bannon's audience expressing absolute rage over his relationship with Epstein. And so we're gonna get to their comments and their concerns in just a moment. And I think it's important to hear from them. But first, let's talk about the Epstein documentary itself. So in late 2018, Netflix began producing their own documentary about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, around that same time, the Miami Herald, if you can remember, was working on publishing exposés on Epstein's crimes, and more importantly, how he was protected by our institutions, or at least members within our institutions. Remember, he got that sweetheart deal in the early aughts, which allowed him to leave prison and essentially get like a slap on the wrist, especially when you take into consideration the predatory, disgusting, abusive behavior that he was engaging in. Now, Epstein and Bannon started to put together a PR counteroffensive to the Netflix documentary. Okay, so per The Guardian, by April, the two were apparently planning a film production that would redeem Epstein's reputation. On April 30th, Epstein wrote, "The Christians I met will feel the media portraying me as beyond redemption is deeply troubling and offensive." I'm gonna venture to say that we have plenty of Christians watching this show right now. You guys write in and tell me, is Epstein the kind of guy who should be considered beyond redemption, considering the fact that he sexually abused, many young girls and got away with it for a very long time? It's interesting how he was planning to use religion as a way to manipulate the American people in order to see him in some sort of positive light, when, make no mistake about it, this guy was a predator. So there's more. Bannon responded to that saying, yes, of course, but we must counter rapist who traffics in female children to be raped by world's most powerful, richest men. That can't be redeemed. Well, at least Bannon was right about that. Now, there's more. Can't redeem unredeemable. You are a lot of things, which we will show, but you are not that. So basically, Steve Bannon here is trying to make a point about, look, if we allow the actual reality to set in about who you really are, that's a problem. So we need to kind of manipulate the situation so you are not presented, or people question the fact that you are presented as this, person who preys on female children. And so Bannon reportedly filmed 15 hours of interview footage featuring Jeffrey Epstein for this documentary that never came out. And he and Bannon were communicating on the very day that Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in 2019. Bannon wrote, "If we arrange it, can we film on the island?" And of course, he was referring to Little St. James. Epstein agreed, by the way. Later, Bannon asked the following: "Can we do late morning, say 11 a.m.? Epstein replied, "All canceled." Minutes later, Epstein was arrested. So the real question is, when is Bannon gonna release all that footage, the interview that he was essentially coordinating with Epstein on, specifically to help him counter the narrative that he was in fact a pedophile who was essentially abusing countless young girls and getting away with it? I think the release of the Epstein files obviously is incredibly important. And from what we've already seen released, there have been some massive revelations, many of which, by the way, our corporate media has decided to completely ignore. Anything that ties Jeffrey Epstein to the Israeli government or prominent members of the Israeli government is completely ignored, neglected by our corporate media. Now, this has to do with Steve Bannon, so suddenly there seems to be a little more interest in what the revelations of these files happen to be. If you frame it in a partisan political perspective, all of a sudden corporate media is interested. And I want to make clear, as I have previously, I don't care about the partisan angle to this, because there are bad actors on both sides, as our coverage of this has made pretty clear. Now, let's talk a little bit about Bannon's audience, because as we learn more about Steve Bannon's relationship with Epstein, members of Bannon's own audience, to their credit, are turning on him. They're being incredibly critical of him, and it shows that these are individuals who actually are motivated by their own principles, their own values. They're not in a cult. And again, I commend them for that. So Media Matters for America compiled an enormous list of commenters giving Bannon a piece of their mind. And I want to give you a few examples of that with their names redacted. So Steve advising Epstein how to sugarcoat his depravities. I've been watching Steve for 6 hours per day since 2020. I'm so done with the MAGA whisperer. Hypocrisy is not only Democrats' disease. So now that the mask is off. I hope that those who supported Bannon, even as he stole money, allegedly, from individuals who were donating to a phony fundraising effort that he put together to build the border wall, realize, no, we weren't lying to you. Okay, the charges that he was facing are serious charges. He stole from the very people who believed in him, who trusted in him, who actually thought he was serious about building that border wall. He took that money and, according to the allegations, just put it in his pocket. He stole from his own supporters. And there's nothing more scummy than that. Well, there is actually, helping a predator who, rapes young girls to clean up his image and launch a counter narrative to an upcoming Netflix documentary that paints him in a more accurate light. Let's go to some more of the comments from Steve Bannon's, former supporters. So one other person writes, "Release your Epstein footage, Bannon. I'm disappointed in you, man. I feel like you lied to us. I was a fan and follower, and now I don't think I can trust you anymore." There's nothing more valuable than trust, that knowing that your audience trusts you, and to just brazenly lie to people or to present yourself in a way that is so deceptive, especially in regard to your own moral character, you're eventually gonna get caught. All things dark come to light. But there's more. One other person writes, "Republican Party is dead thanks to Trump. WTF has he accomplished for the people? He's Israel first, not America first. The economy is no better than Biden's economy. I'm done with voting because it's not for the people, just the corrupt Israel bought neocons. Bannon, you're a piece of you know what. He was Epstein's PR guy. What a liar, no different than Trump. Sad how this country has been sold to Israel." So when you have a groundswell of support from American voters on the right, independents. When you think about the broad coalition that allowed President Donald Trump to win in 2024 with the popular vote, well, obviously that coalition is fragile. And what appealed to these individuals was this claim that, no, we really need to put America first. But what is now kind of coming out in regard to what the real agenda is for the Trump administration and what the real priorities have been for various individuals in Trump's circle, it's just obvious that it's not about taking care of the American people first. Why would you feel this need to sign up to help Epstein launch a counter narrative to a documentary that's coming out? And look, the other thing is, I don't believe Bannon when he's critical of Israel. I just don't. I think he sees that there's a sizable portion of Republican voters, conservative voters, especially when it comes to younger conservative voters. He sees how they feel about Israel and he talks the talk, but behind the scenes, make no mistake about it. Bannon has been and always will be a hardcore Zionist. What happened that made him change his mind? And if he's really America first, why would he allegedly steal the money that was donated to his fundraising campaign to build the Southern Wall, which, as we all know, MAGA cares about deeply? So one of the comments that I read was from a, now former Bannon supporter who says, I don't even want to vote anymore. Don't do that. That's exactly what people want. That's what people in positions of power want. The real question is, moving forward, are American voters gonna do a better job identifying the con men? Because make no mistake, there are tons of con men and women who want power. They want to accumulate power, not to make this country better, but to enrich themselves. And so don't fall prey to the way corporate media covers the horse race. The nonsense, partisan framing oftentimes will blind you to the real vulnerabilities of these politicians and what their actual agendas happen to be. And when you kind of see things outside of a partisan lens and you're able to judge the candidates on a case-by-case basis, look at their records, see whether or not you can confirm the claims they're making about themselves and their records, that's gonna lead you to the right direction. In my opinion, at least it did with me when it came to Tulsi Gabbard, right? Tulsi Gabbard, if you guys can remember, presented herself as like this hardcore progressive. I just looked at her record, and her record did not bear that out at all. And so I got a lot of hate for being one of the first who pointed to her record and said, hey, you know what, just be a little careful about how she's presenting herself. I don't really think this is the identity that you can see from her past and what she's voted on, how she's voted, and how she's commented on things like torture, for instance, which prior to running for president, she was on the record defending torture. So pay close attention, because these people want to lie to you because they want positions of power. Unfortunately, the way our political system works, it does not incentivize truth tellers. It incentivizes basically telling the American people exactly what they want to hear and then pulling the rug out from underneath them as soon as they are able to win these positions of power. So we'll see how this develops, but we can kind of understand now why so many powerful people didn't want the Epstein files to be released. All right, let's move on to our next story. Well, as the Trump administration spends billions in taxpayer dollars to buy up ownership stakes in private companies like Intel, for instance, the president is also making sure that he personally profits from this. So I have mixed feelings about this story, mainly because Trump is getting a lot of flack from members of the left and right in regard to his administration's tactic here, in which the federal government, buys ownership stakes in various private companies. I like that. I don't think he deserves flack for that, because I think it makes a lot more sense to stop forcing Americans to provide their taxpayer dollars for grants for these corporations, which they never benefit from, of course. We never benefit when our government just hands over money to various corporations or subsidies to various corporations. How about if we're giving you money, we should own some of the stakes here, right? And so I like that Trump is doing this, but what I always wondered about was what's in it for him? What is in it for him? Because everything else Trump has done as president, both in his first term and second term, has made clear to me that he doesn't do anything unless he himself is going to personally benefit from it. And now we have our answer thanks to this pretty incredible expose written by the New York Times. So let's get to the nitty gritty. So this revelation was reported in a new piece in the New York Times, which highlights the Trump administration's somewhat unusual snapping up of ownership shares in private companies. So more than $10 billion in taxpayer funds have already been spent buying stakes in firms the government has deemed important to national security. I think semiconductor chips is a perfect example of that. So the government's growing portfolio of corporate ownership involves minority stakes or the option to take them in the future in at least 9 companies involved in steel, minerals, nuclear energy, and semiconductors. So to me, that makes sense. And that, in my opinion, goes along with the narrative that the president is trying to sell to us, that these are items that are important to America and our national security, and they should be manufactured here in the United States. So Intel was really struggling. And when the government under Trump came in and essentially started buying shares of Intel, yes, he helped to save Intel, but I thought that was an important thing to do because we do want to manufacture semiconductor chips here rather than abroad, right? So as the Times explains, some officials are hopeful the equity stakes will generate a windfall for taxpayers, but the likelihood of that is unclear. Many of the companies are facing financial headwinds and some could take years to become profitable. So 3 months ago, we did talk about the largest deal to date, and that was when the federal government took a 10% stake in Intel in exchange for $8.9 billion in taxpayer money. Now, Intel is a chip maker, and it's been struggling to keep up with competitors. I should note, one of the things that annoyed me about the Intel situation here is that rather than investing in innovation, they did spend quite a bit of money on corporate stock buybacks to artificially inflate the value of their shares. But nonetheless, Trump comes in and he offers $8.9 billion in taxpayer money. So we as a country now have a 10% stake in Intel. Now again, I'd rather do that than just hand over the money and not have any ownership of Intel at all. So we'll see how Intel performs moving forward, but that was the thinking. At least that's what Trump said his thinking was when it came to this decision. Now, the government argued that funding Intel in exchange for equity was necessary for national security, since chips, of course, are used in many industries, including telecommunications, the automotive industry, even medicine. And they hoped that propping up Intel would help bring the manufacturing of semiconductor chips back to the United States. Now, the decision, as I mentioned earlier, was met with a lot of backlash on both sides of the political aisle. And they're essentially accusing President Donald Trump of engaging in socialist policy, because of course they are. But so far, I have no problem with what the Trump administration is doing. The problem comes in when it becomes clear that this isn't really about ensuring that American taxpayers, own shares of these companies that need help in order to survive. It looks like it's a little bit of a pumping and enriching yourself type situation when it comes to the value of these shares. So let's get to the details on that. What we didn't know, at the time at least, was that Trump was angling to profit himself. So a public filing from the Office of Government Ethics shows that shortly after that agreement was made, President Trump personally purchased between $1 million and $5 million worth of Intel's corporate debt. So here we're talking about bonds, okay? In other words, Trump is parlaying his own public policy into a payday for himself. So he'll receive interest payments from Intel until the corporate bond he bought, meaning the debt that he bought, matures and the principal is repaid. And while the taxpayer-funded infusion of cash, in the meantime, that taxpayer-funded infusion of cash is going to essentially help Intel boost its profits. So on August 25th, he posted on Truth Social, quote, "I love seeing their," he loves to tell on himself, doesn't he? "I love seeing their stock price go up, making the USA richer and richer." He's making himself richer, let's be clear about that. Then he purchased the Intel bonds on August 29th. So he makes that post August 25th, then he purchases the bonds August 29th. So while that was the most direct evidence of, let's just keep it real, a corrupt act in these ownership deals, there are some subtle examples I can give you as well, and they are outlined in the New York Times piece. So for instance, in early November, the government announced an equity deal with Vulcan Elements, which is a North Carolina-based startup making rare earth magnets. They call them magnets. No one's ever used that word before, magnets. So the company offered the government equity and warrants in return for $50 million from the Commerce Department and $620 million from the Defense Department. The company has received investment from several venture funds, including 1789 Capital, where the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., is a partner. Seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest, no? Maybe a little bit. But anyway, Trump is profiting off companies that are receiving government contracts. That's basically what the heart of this story is. So according to new financial disclosures, Trump bought up to $6 million worth of corporate bonds in Boeing. And according to the documents, Trump bought between $1 million and $5 million worth of Boeing bonds on August 28th. On September 19th, he bought more Boeing bonds worth between $500,000 and $1 million. And while he's been investing in Boeing, the Defense Department has been doling out multi-billion-dollar contracts to them. In March, Trump announced that Boeing would receive a $20 billion development contract for the F-47 fighter jets. I mean, because poor Boeing. Well, I mean, what else would Boeing be able to do without the help of government cheese, right? Without the help of these investors. And look, private investors, retail investors, you want to invest in Boeing, there's no law against that. But what I'm having issue with here is that it seems as though Trump is using taxpayer money to help increase the value of the shares for these corporations that he is also investing in simultaneously. You get what I'm saying? It's a scheme to enrich himself and to increase his own return on investment. And Trump isn't stopping at Intel and Boeing, of course. So he's bought bonds for Meta, Home Depot, CVS Health, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, United Health Group. In the meantime, unemployment is increasing pretty rapidly. There's some new reporting out about tens of thousands of people losing their jobs every month at the same time, cutting interest rates in response to growing unemployment is supposed to help, but it's not helping, meaning that we're entering, stagflation, which is pretty disastrous for our economy. So a lot of Americans are feeling the pain in their pocketbooks, especially as the holidays are happening already. I mean, Thanksgiving is tomorrow. So my heart breaks for what's happening in the country. And in the meantime, these deals are kind of being sold to the American people as a big win for US taxpayers. But the real motive here isn't about doing what's best for American taxpayers. It's about inflating the value of the shares for these companies, which again, Trump is simultaneously investing in. All firms, by the way, all the firms that I listed earlier do stand to gain from government handouts and deregulation. So in total, Trump appears to have bought at least $185 million worth of corporate and municipal bonds since the start of his presidency. Fun. So that's what we're dealing with here, folks. And I think as these stories come out, they're starting to pack more of a punch than they had in Trump's first term. Because you can't present yourself as America first when you're using the office of the presidency to enrich yourself as the American people struggle economically. You can't claim to be America first when your priorities seem to be on other foreign countries as opposed to doing what's best to represent the American people and alleviate some of the economic pain that they are struggling with at the moment. So we'll see what the reaction or response would be to a story like this from Trump's own base. But make no mistake about it, if this were any other administration, any other president, this is a massive scandal. But when it's Trump, it's barely a blip on the radar. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the ongoing civil war within the Republican Party.
Oh, revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I'll only be doing the first hour of the show today. I have to leave, but Cenk will be here with Jordan to do the second hour, and it'll be great. So Nerd Ferguson writes in and says, I'm thankful I have TYT to watch and rescue me from the doldrums of mainstream media. I'm also thankful for this wonderful TYT community. You guys really are wonderful, and I love that you have each other as well. Chocolate Addicted Dragon says, hump day is almost over and it's time for TYT withdrawal over the 4-day holiday. I'm having a turkey dinnerless Thanksgiving. Oh, interesting. Okay, I hope I get my dentures on December 10th so I can at least eat a Christmas dinner. I hope you get them even sooner than that. But thank you for writing in. Doodle Dragon Imran says, yay TYT, love the TYT team. Anna, your hair looks brassy and bombastic. Oh no, the purple shampoo, it didn't work today. I gotta let it soak in for a little longer. Brassy is not good, but I also don't like ashy. Anyway, let's move on. Here's the rest. Let's see. Go get them today, friends. Okay, I have to leave early because I'm gonna do Bill Maher's podcast, and I'm nervous about it. I'm just gonna keep it 100. So everyone cross your fingers for me. Wedge writes in and says, happy Thanksgiving holiday to all that is TYT. Anna, Cenk, Bart, behind the scenes team. And last but not least, the awesome community here on the interwebs. Yes, absolutely. Let's go over to our super chats, read a few of those comments. We've got Michelle who says, Anna, you and Candace Owens are my inspiration. Happy Thanksgiving to you and Cenk. By the way, I know that Candace Owens is making some very serious and scary claims about an assassination plot against her. I don't want to cover that until it develops a little further. I don't really want to comment on something that we don't have enough details about, but thank you for writing in. Dav Mill says, had to change my email, Romulus 463, and then he writes in again. So Romulus is Dav Mill, and Dav also says, I see through the lies of politicians, study history, philosophy, and economics. Absolutely, Dav. I like Romulus, though. Can I continue calling you Romulus? It's fun to say. Raw with Chris says, it may sound silly, but would you run as a politician, Anna? I only see women being the voice of the people. Go Max. Probably not, to be honest with you. I think I'm more effective doing what I do now. And what I see in our current political system is one person is not gonna be able to make much of a difference. What would make a lot of difference is an organized electorate that demands more from our politicians. So an outside pressure campaign, I think, is far more effective than a single person who has the right intentions getting elected into Congress. Tell you about Mobile Noble, okay? You need to know about Mobile Noble right now. So it's just a better cell company if you're looking to change. Even if you're not looking to change, just hit them up, see if you like what they have to offer. So look, I'm really trying to use my phone. That's not true, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not trying to use my phone less. However, if you are trying to use your phone less, you know that it's not that easy to do it. So if you switch to Noble Mobile, they will help you essentially rack up cash for all the service you don't need to use because you're trying to use your phone less, right? So get paid to use your phone less with Mobile Noble. On the No Bull plan, you get unlimited data for just $50 a month. Check it out at tyt.com/switch. That's tyt.com/switch. Also get a $50 sign up bonus from Mobile Noble for a limited time only at tyt.com/switch. All right, let's get to our next story.
If he invades Venezuela or gives more money to Ukraine, his movement will dissolve.
The American dream will officially be dead, and millions of voters will forever associate MAGA with its decline. Welcome to the midterms. Welcome to 2028. This is the barrel of the gun that we are looking down.
I was done with MAGA at the moment he looked us in the face and he said, what files, right? What are we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Pam Bondi said it was a Democrat hoax. No, I think the entire nation has been hoaxed by Republicans and Democrats.
MAGA is dead. Now we're in the America First debate. Soon it's going to be the America Only debate.
Does voting matter anymore? I don't know. I don't know whether voting matters so much. Like looking back, I mean, we didn't really have much of a option here, but I mean, so we thought. But it is nothing I voted for happened.
Listen, regardless of where you land on the political spectrum, I think we could all admit Sean Ryan is all of us in what he said in that clip, because I think most Americans feel disappointed with the politicians they support, vote in favor of, and then they, again, like to pull the rug from underneath you, and they don't live up to their promises. But that is ripping the GOP base, the Republican base, apart at this moment. And it really has to do with the performance of the Trump administration in relation to the various promises that were made by President Trump on the campaign trail. And I really do want to give the various people that we're about to hear from credit for just doing an honest analysis of the job President Trump is doing in his second term. Because I can't stand partisan shillery, okay? And there's a lot of that going on where people are so blinded by their loyalty to their tribe that they are unable to see how their own favored politicians are either screwing them over or not living up to expectations. I think the only way things will get better in this country is if we are willing to see these politicians for who they are and judge them based on the job that they're doing. And it's not gonna matter if a Democrat is critical of the Trump administration. It matters way more when members of the Republican Party, the Republican base, specifically voters, are willing to hold their politicians' feet to the fire. And the same is true of Democrats in regard to Democratic politicians. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on, because this Republican civil war continues to ripple through the party as the result of President Donald Trump, in their words, betraying the America First crowd. And as you just saw, conservatives are noticing that foreign countries and corporate donors are the only ones becoming great again. But ordinary Americans are still struggling to get by. So this is a story about priorities, about the current economic situation in the United States, and more. Meanwhile, the vast majority of congressional Republicans are essentially following Trump's orders, bowing their heads. There are a few exceptions, but those are the individuals, people like Thomas Massie, for instance, who have to deal with the viciousness of Donald Trump over Massie's unwillingness to be blindly loyal to him, even when he doesn't agree with what Trump is doing. So there are, again, a select few congressional Republicans who are trying to do the right thing here, like Senator Rand Paul, who I disagree with politically on pretty much everything, with the exception of foreign policy. I think the more libertarian leaning politicians are better on foreign policy than Republicans, and honestly, these days, even Democrats. So why don't we get to the next clip and hear what Rand Paul has to say.
Lindsey Graham has not changed his positions, but he's clever and he's become very close to the president, influences the president. Same with Marco Rubio. So the pending invasion or regime change war in Venezuela is hatched by those people. I actually think Trump is the one who is least likely to want to do these things, but he's surrounded by people who believe in regime change and are goading him on. I do think, though, that if he invades Venezuela, or if he approves significant arms sales, which are really gifts to Ukraine, or more welfare to Ukraine, if he does either of those, the rift with Marjorie Greene will pale in comparison to what happens to his movement if he invades Venezuela or gives more money to Ukraine. His movement will dissolve.
So if you're spending a lot of time on X, chances are you're seeing a lot of posts from people who purport to be on Team Trump, totally supporting the idea of military action against Maduro in Venezuela. However, that's not reality, because if you look at the polling, upward of 70% of Americans are against the US military going into Venezuela to do a regime change war. Only 30% are in favor. And so a sizable portion of Republican voters don't want this. Remember, they voted for Trump because he was the guy who was like, I will not start any new wars. Well, now it looks like he's poised to start a new war that is totally avoidable. Now, Nicolas Maduro, I don't have love for him, okay? But I don't care to go in, risk the lives of our soldiers and expend resources we do not have as a country that's currently drowning in tens of trillions of dollars in debt. I just don't think it's a smart move to invade, especially when Maduro is like, what do you want, Trump? I'll do whatever you need me to do. What do you want? You want the oil? Let's make a deal. So there are opportunities to solve whatever Trump thinks he needs to solve through diplomacy, but he doesn't want to do that, which I think is incredibly strange. So again, he does appear poised to go to war with Venezuela. Hopefully he'll pull back, but we don't know yet. Newsmax anchor Michael Savage, who, as you can imagine, is the furthest thing from being a left-winger, is even calling Trump out on this. Let's take a look at what he has to say.
You don't have to be a genius to understand what's happening. So I'll make it simple for you. A few weeks ago, we had a dinner in the White House for the tech titans, Microsoft, Facebook, Google. They all had dinner with Trump. They all hated him during the election. Then they all turned around and loved him and paid for the ballroom. And in return, they got H-1B visas for lower paid workers, in plain English.
When you make promises and you repeat those promises over and over and over again on the campaign trail, you can't then turn around and break every single one of those promises and expect your base to continue supporting you. Now, Trump got away with a lot more in the first term. But to be fair, I think that he actually did provide some cookies to his base in the first term. This time around, I've seen him enrich himself quite a bit. I've seen the Trump administration focus on, sending more and more military aid abroad. The war in Ukraine rages on. I thought it was gonna be over in 24 hours once Trump is in office, once he's inaugurated. Obviously that didn't happen. Obviously he wasn't serious in saying that it was gonna end in 24 hours. But obviously the foreign policy issues that he treated as if they were just like simple things that he can just manage immediately are way more complex, way more complicated than he made them out to be. And so again, when you break all these promises, there will be political ramifications to that. I want to skip ahead to Raheem Kassem, who is the former editor-in-chief of Breitbart London. He wrote the following: President Trump must quickly return to his own populist roots and campaign pledges rather than entertaining the big pharma or big bank bosses and floating non-starter ideas like 50-year mortgages. I mean, obviously, I agree with him on that. 50-year mortgages are a slap in the face for Americans who are struggling to buy homes in the tightest housing market, probably ever. We are having a crisis because of the lack of inventory. And what has Trump done in regard to private equity buying up homes? Nothing. What has Trump done in terms of spurring the development of new homes? Nothing. He has focused on foreign policy quite a bit. He has focused on, manipulating various federal government deals with corporations so he can enrich himself, which was an incredible expose that was reported by the New York Times just this week. But in regard to bettering the quality of life for the American people and his base in particular, well, they're just not seeing it. And they're right in calling him out on this. There's more. So on the topic of 50-year mortgages, Savannah Hernandez, who's lovely, I disagree with her politically, but we've had her on her take, and she's a reporter. She's a conservative reporter, but she's also, interested in the facts. And in this case, she's calling out the 50-year mortgages. She says, we voted for home affordability and we were given 50-year mortgages and debt slavery. Americans voted to feel safe, prioritized, and protected. And every time we try to voice our concerns, we are labeled as anti-MAGA, anti-Israel, or anti-Trump for bringing forth substantial criticism of the direction of the party. And again, everyone we've cited so far is a conservative. These are not leftists. These are not Democrats. These are not liberals. And there's more. Like, if they're clearly furious with Trump, by the way, they should keep doing what they're doing. Because the only way to ensure that your party's representatives and your president is carrying out the promises that were made on the campaign trail is if you as conservatives are willing to hold his feet to the fire. Because Trump's not gonna care what liberals think or what Democrats think, obviously. The only people that he does seem to care about at least a little bit is his own base. So let's get to some other examples. Look, Tucker Carlson hasn't really been like a little wilting flower when it comes to being critical of the Trump administration. So he explained how the Republican Party has been hijacked by its donors. And that is absolutely true. That's not novel in our political system. The same is true of the Democratic Party. But nonetheless, let's take a look at what he had to say.
Does the Republican Party exist to help its voters, every voter actually, every citizen, or does it exist for some other boutique corrupt reason, like serving a foreign government, serving your donors? And I do think that's the argument. I think that's the argument that Trump started when he ran in 2015. It was not about make America great again, which everyone is for. Who wouldn't be for that? It's about America first, which is the idea behind MAGA. America first, just put your country first. If you're its leader, you don't have to put America first, you're just a citizen. But if you're running the country, you have a moral obligation to put its citizens before all others. It's not a controversial idea, it's the only idea. By the way, that's the Fuentes, that's the actual Fuentes message. I'm not an expert on Fuentes, okay, I interviewed him. But from what I could tell, he is angry because he feels that the conservative establishment, Ben Shapiro all the way up to some idiot Republican senator, all of them are telling the same lie. We're on your side, but they're not.
And in 2016, when Bernie voters, a sizable portion of Bernie Sanders supporters and voters on the Democratic side, switched sides and ended up voting for Donald Trump, it wasn't because they were enamored with, a funny looking man who presents himself as a tremendously successful billionaire. No, they voted for him because of the populist messaging. And you can't continue to pretend as though you're an economic populist as Americans are getting absolutely crushed by our economy. And as they're being crushed by our economy, Trump turns around and does what the Biden administration did. Gaslight voters. Tell voters, no, this is the greatest economy that's ever occurred in the United States. Now, to be fair to Biden, he didn't say that. But I do remember the endless commentary from supporters of the Democratic Party, from members of Biden's administration, just chiding anyone who complained about the economy. No, what are you talking about? GDP is doing great. Yeah, but inflation was crushing Americans. And acknowledging corporate price gouging after the fact isn't really gonna help anyone, is it? So nothing wakes people up faster. Nothing makes Americans more clear-eyed about our current political situation than a bad economy. Because you can't lie about a bad economy. People feel it in their personal lives. They feel it every single day. And so I'm really happy to see that there are people on the right who are willing to stand up and say to Trump and the Trump administration overall, you aren't delivering for us. Again, the only thing that makes our political system better is if voters are willing to call out members of their own party. Because again, Trump is only gonna care about his base. Democrats are only gonna care about their base. If they're getting negative feedback from voters on the other side of the aisle, well, you're not gonna vote for me anyway, who cares? But when your own base is furious with the job you're doing, you're more likely to listen. And honestly, Trump's priorities in this term have been all over the place. It's all about him. And it's all about, his donors, the tech industry. I mean, he is fighting tooth and nail right now to ensure that states will not be able to regulate artificial intelligence within their own state borders. Why is he doing that? Could it be because the tech industry heavily funded his campaign? Yeah, that's what it's about. Is AI data centers something that Trump voters were thinking they were signing up for? AI data centers in their own neighborhoods, their own communities, which will jack up energy prices in their own neighborhoods, their own communities. Is that what they signed up for when they cast their ballots for Donald Trump? I doubt it. So yeah, people are getting increasingly angry and I don't blame them. And while I didn't vote for Trump, and I know for a fact Trump would never care what I have to say, I'm living in this economy as well. And I see the pain, I see the suffering, and running on making America great again and then leading the country in this way, it's gonna lead to backlash, and I'm happy to see it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back for our last segment, God, there's so much to get into, including what Alan Dershowitz was up to in smearing some of my favorite academics. We'll be right back. right, Pseudo Dragon makes a really good point because this is true. If you are a real Christian, then nobody is beyond redemption. That's the core of the religion. That is true. And it's actually a beautiful part of the religion, if you ask me. But he was about as close as you can get, meaning Epstein being irredeemable. 19 Snowflake says, I'm most thankful for you, Anna, for Cenk and Johnny Pie and every single person that works on TYT and all of the members. You're all family and I love you all. It's so sweet. Thank you for writing in. Childless Cat Lady, Sociopath Dragon says, I love you, DJ Bart.
I just love you.
Who doesn't love Bart? I mean, come on. Burrito Bandito says they're all in bed together, corporations and government. It's analogous to sexual anarchy. I mean, it seems pretty organized. I don't know if it's anarchy, but yeah, look, the only people getting effed seems to be the American people, unfortunately. Green New Dealer Dragon in our Twitch sub says Bannon is definitely not America first. Bannon is more like, I think Bannon is Bannon first, number one. But Green New Dealer Dragon says Bannon is more like pedos first. By the way, Christians here watching the show, makes me feel pretty good. Thanks for being here, babe.
I just love you.
Microgram says, what's the over under on hitting $40 trillion plus in debt by the time Trump's gone? Higher. I think we're already at $39 trillion. I was reading a report the other day. I'm like, wow, things are getting bad. I mean, we were already spending $1 trillion a year servicing that debt. That's crazy. Absolutely insane. Ryu Rawl says, Tulsi, Fetterman, and Sinema, all progressive presenting, all pure cons. Yup, totally right about that. Project for Progress says, now I have a new reason to loathe holidays, no TYT episode. Well, we do have stories that we squirreled away to publish during the holidays. So definitely check out our YouTube channel. There will be some content there that you can enjoy as we have a little bit of time off for the holidays. Wavy Davy says, today I'm thankful for whoever gifted me this TYT membership. I live alone, very far from nearest family, and the TYT community always feels like there's someone in the room with me. You guys are awesome, I love it. Patrick Royster says, Anna, you look radiant today, that's all. I appreciate you, thank you so much. Steve Torger says, disagree, Anna. You're part of a new party, better to call it a movement. But every movement becomes disaffected and dies without inspirational voices who can also show policy can still be made. Yeah, that's why I kind of had the reaction I did when Cenk, like, he uses the word we a lot when he's talking about himself, and he used like the label progressive. Right now, I don't feel comfortable with any label. Yes, I hold some progressive values for sure, there's no question about it. But I just don't feel like any political group right now, I don't feel like I fit in with any specific political label or group right now. And the political labels make less and less sense. Things are just shifting so rapidly in the US. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
I just love you. I just love you.
I don't want to waste any time. Let's get right to our next story.
What the right needs to actually say, and again, it's politically unpopular, but they do need to say is, listen, if you're failing in life, yes, we can get the obstacles out of your way, but kind of, it's a little your fault. It's a little your fault. You should actually pick your ass up and go out and do something useful. And this notion that you as a Gen Z male are facing these obstacles that no other human has faced for all of human history, like read a book for once, like seriously, like go talk to your grandfather. But there are people who will say, we shouldn't give aid to Ukraine and we shouldn't give aid to Israel and we shouldn't give aid to Egypt and we shouldn't give aid to Saudi Arabia. Fine. Okay, I think that's stupid. I think that's poorly thought out.
No aid to Americans in regard to US taxpayer money, but aid to foreign countries, you gotta do it, of course. Now, while Ben Shapiro makes the case that young and disaffected Americans should essentially stop whining and pick themselves up by the bootstraps, he also manages to argue in favor of US military aid for Israel, and as you just heard from that clip, other foreign countries as well. And he makes these points hilariously in the context of the exact same panel discussion. So let's get into it because this is pretty incredible. So what prompted a bit of a crash out that you're about to witness really centered on the topic, of course, of Nick Fuentes, because of course. I mean, I feel like that's the only topic that's being discussed right now in these circles, at these conferences. And so what's behind Nick Fuentes' popularity? Why is this happening? Like, that's the real question that keeps coming up in the context of these conferences. And while I think there's a legitimate argument to be made about, young, disaffected men who feel left behind by both American culture and especially by the economy, looks like Ben Shapiro has a different argument. So look, there's no question that Nick Fuentes says both incredibly offensive, terrible things, but on top of that, he tends to speak to the frustrations that young American males are currently experiencing, and that needs to be addressed. But instead of addressing it, the name calling and ad hominem attacks happen. What also doesn't help is what you're about to see from Ben Shapiro.
The Andrew Tate thing is a great comp for what's happening with Fuentes. Fuentes is the political version of Andrew Tate. It's just to burn it all down. Right, we hate all of this. All the institutions have been thoroughly destroyed. And so now we just have to get rid of whatever superstructure remains, just tear down the facade.
What about the 20-year-olds who are trying to find their way in this movement and in this country?
What young men really want to do is actually go build things. They actually want to go out and forge into the world and be useful and be productive. And this is why you'll hear complaints. Oh, I can't get married anymore. I can't buy a house. I mean, you can, but that's a thing that you're being told over and over. You can't get married. Why can't you get married? Right? I can't have, yes, you certainly can have kids. I can't buy a house. No, you actually can. You just have to move out of New York. I got so much crap for this last week. You just might have to move out of New York City and go check out Texas. One of the things that I would love to see the right do with young men is actually do a little bit more tough talk with them. I think that the right is actually weirdly feminizing young men by giving them a victimology to buy into. If you're failing in life, yes, we can get the obstacles out of your way, but it's a little your fault. It's a little your fault. You should actually pick your ass up and go out and do something useful. And this notion that you as a Gen Z male are facing these obstacles that no other human has faced for all of human history, read a book for one day, seriously.
The reason why it's offensive to tell young Americans that if they can't afford the neighborhoods they grew up in and have roots in is because those roots include their family members, their friends. Getting priced out of the community that you grew up in is infuriating, especially when you have no solutions at all from the very people that are supposed to represent Americans in their best interests, and that's these politicians who are pretty much useless. And it's offensive when there aren't any solutions at all, period. I don't want to move to Texas, right? I want to stay here where my family is. And that's why you have more and more young Americans. I'm talking about, when I say young, I'm talking about the Americans in their late 20s, early 30s. They want to stay close to their families. They can't afford the housing, so they move in with their grandmas, okay? Or they move in with their parents. And it is incredibly frustrating to see how much more difficult it is for younger generations to just reach the typical milestones in life that previous generations were able to get to much earlier than younger generations are able to today. So that's not a solution. Essentially telling Americans in a rigged economic system where more and more wealth is getting concentrated at the very top, it is not a solution to tell them to shut up, buck up, and stop whining. And you can't, on one hand, chide Americans for their victim mentality while aiding and abetting the victim mentality that we hear incessantly from the government of Israel. We're gonna get to that in just a minute, but first, a little more of the crash out.
Judaism values the idea that you're supposed to forge forth into the world and you have moral duties that you're supposed to do every single day. These are things that you're required to do every single day, and that you're a loser if you don't. Really, you're a loser and you're making your life worse. Okay, we shouldn't be shy about this. I think that we're all too shy about this sort of stuff with young men, particularly. We say, oh, well, if you choose not to, that's why. If you should, no. Your life will be worse and you will be a loser if you don't do these things that are going to make your life better. If you listen to Nick Fuentes, you are likely to be a loser. He is a loser. He is a basement-dwelling, ridiculous loser who spends his days ranting on the internet to a bunch of other basement dwellers. Don't be one of those people.
You have to dismantle the actual substance of the arguments that Nick Fuentes is making. Calling him a loser and then addressing his audience as a group of losers is only going to make the very issue you care deeply about, Ben, a lot worse. How does he not see this? And this is the thing, Ben is doing okay financially, as we can all imagine. And sometimes what ends up happening when you're doing real well economically, financially, you become disconnected from the reality on the ground for the vast majority of Americans. So rather than telling these young men to go read a book because they're losers in their mom's basements, how about you step outside your studio and have conversations with real people and talk to them about what they're going through. And if you don't want to, that's okay. I mean, I can help you out because I have specific examples of specific Americans and what they've been going through. So keep in mind, our economy currently has a problem with inflation, rising unemployment, a housing shortage, severe housing shortage, private equity snatching up homes despite the fact that we have limited inventory of homes to buy, which is making the situation worse. And our government is sending foreign countries hundreds of billions of dollars as our people are suffering. So like I don't watch Nick Fuentes, but I'm angry. How could I not be angry? How can you see what's happening on the ground in this country? Okay, people living in squalor on the streets. Close to 100,000 Americans dying of drug overdoses every year. How do you look at those statistics and think to yourself, you know what? The people who are struggling right now, they're the problem. And look, I get it. I get, there's definitely some people who love to wallow in self-pity, don't think they have any agency, and just think that things should be handed to them. But is that the real problem right now? No, that's not the real problem right now. It's not. When you have people who are coming into college because they think I need to get this college degree, otherwise I'm not gonna get hired anywhere, and they leave with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because at this point, higher education has become quite a bit of a scam. How do you not speak out against that system? How do you think that it's okay for so many Americans to, like the average age of home ownership in this country is now 38. And the solution from the federal government so far has been, hey, maybe we consider legalizing 50-year mortgages. Okay, so you buy a house at 40 with a 50-year mortgage. Do the math, do the math. Let's give you some specific examples because the Financial Times just published a piece about the residents of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, hardly Los Angeles, California, hardly New York City. It's the kind of place where Ben would like to think Americans struggling in these big cities can move to, for affordability. But let's check in with the residents of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Let's see how they're doing. Anissa Camacho, a 26-year-old florist who can no longer afford rent, so she moved in with her grandparents. It feels like everything is just closing in around us, honestly. I work 2 jobs, my partner works 2 jobs, and it just feels like we are like scraping for crumbs here. So you have a dual income household in which both members of said household are working 2 jobs. And she needs to move in with her grandmother because they can't afford rent. Dimitri Nash, 32 years old. He works as a yard driver for a local warehouse, sometimes up to 72 hours a week. It's not optional. It's mandatory for me to work the hours that I work because of the rise in cost of living. He has cut back meals to save money. Quote, it shouldn't be that way, especially for food. You gotta eat, he said. So I'm sure it's his fault. Some way, somehow it's his fault. He doesn't realize that he has agency, that he can pick himself up by the bootstraps and maybe work, 80 hours a week instead of 72. Mark Riddle, the executive director of a food pantry in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, stated, quote, "We see a lot of people who have been evicted because they couldn't pay their rent, because they had a car accident and then couldn't pay their medical bills. I think that's the sort of homelessness that we'll start to see a lot more of." But I don't want to hear anything about their victimhood, says Ben Shapiro. Because all of his patience for victimhood apparently is reserved for a specific country, and we know what that country is. So let's hear what he has to say about struggling Americans who pay their taxes and then watch their tax revenue get sent abroad to a country committing atrocities in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in other Middle Eastern countries. Let's take a look.
The MOU, yeah, I think, again, it provides a convenient talking point for people who don't understand geopolitics in any significant way. The reality is that in many ways, the MOU is significantly better for the United States than it is for Israel. It allows the United States to yank Israel's chain on matters of security. It allows America to hamper Israel's military industrial complex in fairly significant ways. And so I think there's actually a fairly solid case to be made that the MOU is more beneficial to the United States government than it is to the Israeli government. I think for both governments, it would be better if they negotiated toward the end of an MOU. And I think that the prime minister would like to do that actually at some point in the very, very near future.
Ben is a liar. The Israeli government has proposed that the United States sign a 20-year MOU. So MOU is basically the agreement for the US to funnel military aid to Israel, okay? They're usually a decade long. That was the last MOU that was agreed upon during the Obama administration. Netanyahu and the Israeli government sees the writing on the wall. They see how unpopular Israel is and how unpopular it is for the American people to send their resources to a country that's committing atrocities. And so in response to that, the Israeli government's like, oh, we better lock this in for 20 years instead of 10. So do not talk to me about how like, oh yeah, the current prime minister is totally like finding a way to wean off the, I can't use that word, so I'm just gonna move off of it. But wean themselves off of dependency of US taxpayer money. No, they're not. They're not. So I just don't understand how he thinks making these two conflicting points in the context of the same panel discussion is gonna work out well for him. Calling people who watch Nick Fuentes' show losers, you're not gonna win your argument by doing that. He knows that better than anyone, but he keeps doing it anyway. How is it that our resources are not well suited to use on our people, but it somehow makes sense to feed into the victim mentality of the Israeli government and funnel our resources over to them? Government handouts, totally okay when it comes to Israel, not okay when it comes to helping Americans at a time when our economy is falling apart. This is why you're losing, Ben. Wake up, read a book. We gotta go. I'm really upset because I really wanted to talk about the Alan Dershowitz, Epstein story. Maybe they'll cover it in the second hour without me. Please cover it, Cenk. Anyway, love you guys. That's it for me, but stick around. Cenk Uygur and Jordan Uhl will be here for the second hour.
What contributions to the progressive cause are you most proud of? I mean, I don't have super high aspirations for a singular role that I can play in the movement or anything. I try to present myself as what I think that I am, which is a progressive man who is driven by a, I think, well-interrogated and well-organized system of values that I try to stay consistent on, and I demonstrate that that's the sort of life that a person can lead and be successful and be happy and all of that. And that should not need to be done, but there are so many people on the right that are trying to push men in the opposite direction that I want to be able to do that. Along the way, if I can get people to care about some topics that they wouldn't necessarily care about, or that for some men they might think that's not a topic that they should be focused on, that's definitely something that I relish doing. And along the way, I mean, we've been able to introduce people to a lot of candidates. That's been a big part of what we've done. not all of them necessarily got in office. Probably most of them did not. And a lot of them you might not even remember their names. But it was great to be able to provide people the platform where they had the chance of, making a difference. Obviously AOC and all that, but there's been a lot of great people along the way.
In the bonus episode for the members, we do some inside baseball. We're gonna look at John's desk. Nice little spaceship here. Nerd. But it is kind of look cool. Who has Legos? Oh no. He's taken apart a keyboard. Who has a mouse pad that's this big? He's got a dog with a nose that you can hang something on. You know what this desk screams to me? Nerd. And that's how we like him. We love Johnny Pie. He's got his own personality like everybody does at TYT. Come meet us all in the bonus episodes. TYT.com/team. David Sorrell, Anita Turner. Adam Green drop by.
Charlemagne.
Congressman, great to have you. It's great to be with you, Jack.
Your show is a great thing. You're informing people. A lot of the shows that I live on, my CNN, my MSNBC, and even Fox, and any of the other shows, NPR, they are so quick to decide that they know what this building means today.
The one thing that I hate that politicians do, they talk about the people they should be talking to.
Do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated, or do they not realize that at all?
People are so deeply in their little universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing.
Voters have a right to ask questions of any nominee, whether they're independent, Republican, or Democrat.
The system is wobbly, that suppresses competition.
How is it the year 2024 and we're still like, maybe they'll talk about paid medical? Like, how is that like at one level, it's like, this is what we're talking about now. You're like, it's 2024.
And that's always been the critique, that your critique of us is, well, you guys give good speeches, you put out good tweets, but you're not wielding actual power. Now we're starting to.
My favorite news platform by far. It's not even close.
It's about a country and a principle, and that's what you and I both worked to achieve. And I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
If you want to go really hear what's going on, honestly, you should tune into the Young Turks.
Thanks for doing such a great job. Please keep it up. Hang tough.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, I like making you happy.
I didn't know about that.
This is a happy Anna Kasparian.
Awesome.
You're welcome, YouTube.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
Back on TYT, we switch it up, hosts left and right. You crazy? All right, Jake, Jordan Yule with you guys, and CDN Norse Dog Dad. Thank you for gifting a membership on YouTube. We appreciate it. For all of you buying your Christmas gifts through shoptyt.com, we appreciate that. Plus, we appreciate it so much. If you use the promo code THANKS, that's us thanking you /Thanksgiving. You get it, 20% off. Entire site. You gotta go. I mean, it's crazy not to go. ShopTYT.com. Go get some TYT merch, progressive merch. I think you'll love it. All right, Jordan, what are we doing first?
Take a look at this.
You acknowledge that there's been no starvation, correct?
No.
You don't acknowledge
I
that?
don't acknowledge that. You say none of this has happened. You see everything to the there's nothing to see here, Gus.
No.
Israel has done no wrong.
No.
Have they done any wrong?
I don't know how to conduct a war exactly, but I know that if
it's not my question. Has the Israeli government done anything wrong in the way they prosecuted this war?
Not that I know of.
Piers Morgan recently took on Dave Rubin in a debate about Israel. And as with most things that Dave Rubin does, it was deeply embarrassing for him. We're going to go through more of it, hear more lies and insanity from Rubin, including a hilarious shout out he gave to Cenk. But first, Cenk, what are your 2 cents about what we just saw?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's a redemption arc for me, but there, I just said it. Because look, guys, you have to do the strategy based on who you're dealing with and what the situation is. So my strategy for Piers Morgan was, I think he's an open-minded guy. We have to bear through 200 times he asked if we support Hamas or not, but we're gonna get to the right side. And it looks like Piers Morgan has gotten to the right side most definitively. That is wonderful to see. On the other hand, Dave Rubin required a different strategy, which is handing him his ass. And that also worked. So let's watch the culmination of both of those in this story.
Yeah, well, I think the most horrifying part of this debate, if you could even really call it that because it was so lopsided, was that Dave Rubin denied, just straight up, that anybody was suffering from hunger or malnutrition in Gaza. Take a look.
You acknowledge that there's been no starvation, correct?
No.
You don't acknowledge that?
I don't acknowledge that.
Well, there was starvation of the Israeli hostages, but you
yes.
So where are the videos and images of the starving Gazans?
Well, I've seen a lot, but you would dismiss them all as fakes.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, if you can show me one, I'll tweet it out.
Okay, here's my problem with this. Yeah. So the problem is my number one problem with this. Yeah. You can say there's no starvation. I can say there's starvation. The UN says there was starvation, but you guys don't believe a word the UN says. The other official bodies say there was starvation. You don't want to hear a word they say. Israel denies everything. And in the end, the biggest problem is that Israel will not allow, to this day, international journalists into Gaza to do their jobs.
So when this all ended a few weeks ago, when Trump does this thing, where are all the thousands of starving people? I mean, we're seeing videos of restaurants that are
let the journalists in.
But the Gazans have phones and they're showing videos of.
You can say that no Gazan has starved at all. That's entirely your prerogative. Yeah. The reports by almost every official body say the opposite, but you don't believe them.
Why did none of the Hamas fighters, when they're releasing the people, look hungry? A lot of them look fat. They have fresh clothes and fresh haircuts.
I've seen lots of images of Palestinians looking hungry.
He then challenged Piers to bust out his phone and show him the starving people, and said that what he sees is young men with, quote, perfectly cut hair with clothes that fit. There are no shortage of photos and videos of children and adults suffering from malnutrition in Gaza, as you all know. Some of them are too graphic to even share with you on the show because people in them are no longer alive. But here are some of the other options for Dave, since he claims that he'll happily tweet out any photos that prove him wrong. Let us know if you need the links to these, Dave. The first is 10-year-old Nefez. The second is 6-year-old Misk. And the third is 17-year-old Ayman. But photos are just anecdotal. What does the research say? According to the World Health Organization, as of September 5th, 2025, 361 Palestinians have died due to malnutrition, including 130 children. A Lancet study published in October found that after nearly 2 years of war and severe restrictions in humanitarian aid, tens of thousands of preschool-aged children in the Gaza Strip are suffering from preventable acute malnutrition and facing an increased risk of mortality. But that's not all Dave lied about. He also claimed that Israel didn't really want to take Palestinian land. Take a look.
You have a government with people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir who begin publicly, openly talking about ethnically cleansing all the Palestinians from Gaza, about annexing the West Bank, about taking complete control of all of it, to the point that Donald Trump had to step in and say that is not happening, and credit to him for doing that.
Sure, so when random ministers talking about,
but two of the most senior people in the government.
No.
Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are not just right-wing, they're absolute far-right headbangers.
But meaning what? Meaning what? They have
meaning what? They want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people. Come on, Dave, they do.
They're in the government and they haven't taken an extra inch of the West Bank. They haven't, they're not.
Well, actually, that's not true.
They haven't.
They've been expanding settlements left, right, and center.
They haven't.
Yes, they have.
Piers,
you know they have.
Piers, have you been to the West Bank?
You don't think there've been any expansion of settlements on the West Bank?
They build apartments. They build apartments in current places.
Has there been an aggressive expansion of settlements in the West Bank in this war?
An aggressive expansion of settlements
in the West Bank during this war?
No, 100% not.
There has been.
So what's the truth? Israeli settlers have established at least 49 new illegal shepherding outposts and displaced more than 60 Palestinian communities across the occupied West Bank since October 7th, 2023. The areas surrounding all Israeli herding outposts now cover 14% of the entire West Bank, according to an analysis by watchdog groups Peace Now and Kerem Nevat. And in September, Netanyahu signed an expansion plan or an Israeli settlement called Male Adumim, where Israel plans to build thousands more houses. The explicit goal of the settlement is to divide the West Bank. And to be clear, Israel announced these plans and other expansion plans in the West Bank. The idea that they haven't taken an inch isn't rooted in reality. It's a deliberate lie. And Jank, I want to bring you in here. Of course, we have to acknowledge this was never about the West Bank originally. It started in Gaza, and they used that as cover to continue these illegal settlements. What do you make of what Dave had to say?
Yeah, I am genuinely curious. Maybe we should have done a poll question about this, whether Dave is an enormous liar or dumb as a rock. And I know the standard answer is both, right? But I do tend to think it's one or the other. And there's some chance he just is so biased, so ignorant, that he never even bothered to look up the other side, that he was told Israeli propaganda and he breathed it in and was like, yeah, that's obviously true. No, he took nothing from the West Bank. But brother, we got news story after news story after news story, by the way, from Israel, let alone in the press in the rest of the world, talking about the illegal settlement expansions, the tremendous violence that the settlers are doing against the Palestinians. By the way, 9 Americans killed, and our government does nothing about it. Does Dave Rubin even know that 9 Americans have been killed in the last 3 years by Israel? Does he care? Of course not, because they were Muslim Americans. So he's like, who cares? They're just, I mean, like their racism and bigotry is so enormous, so overwhelming, that the main thing you get, whether it's ignorance or it's purposeful deceit, is the enormous indifference to anyone who isn't Israeli. Like to him, the Palestinians, who cares? Israel murdered 20,000 Palestinian kids in Gaza. Who cares? Are they even human? They're not Israeli. Basically, Rubin is screaming throughout this interview debate, I don't care about Arabs or Muslims or any other human being that isn't Israeli. So that's why, they were starving. No, they weren't. What is that? So look, Jordan gave you some of the numbers. I saw a different article at about 453 who starved to death, 150 kids who starved to death. But think about it, guys. If around 400 people starved to death, and Piers is right, if we had more international journalists in, we'd have a more specific number, right? So we have these numbers like over 68,000 killed, but there's tens of thousands buried in the rubble. So every day the numbers get added to as they pull dead bodies out of the rubble of Israel. So if there's 450 or so that already starved to death, that means almost the entire population was on the edge of starvation. That's why some people fell off that cliff and literally died from not having enough food. They starved an entire population until they started dying. Do you know how cruel that is? That is collective punishment. It is an obvious war crime. Now, look, you'll be able to tell how disgusting it is. Even if you grew up on American media propaganda, all I gotta do is reverse the roles. Imagine the Palestinians or Hamas was in charge of Israel. So that Israel was occupied territory, Tel Aviv was, Jerusalem was, Haifa was, etc. And Hamas started to starve the Jewish people in Tel Aviv to death. And we got reports on another Jewish kid died, another Jewish kid died. Oh my God, 150 Jewish kids have died of starvation because they're doing collective punishment against the Jews. I would hope that the whole world and all of America would be outraged. I would hope that Dave Rubin and Piers Morgan and everybody would be outraged. And guess what? My hope would be fulfilled because that's all the media would ever talk about, rightfully so, right? But when it comes to the Palestinians, nah, who cares? Who cares that their children starved to death? Well, you're a monster, an absolute hideous monster. And this isn't about land. Do you see how he immediately changes Jordan to the West Bank? Already he's preposterously wrong or lying about the West Bank. But Gaza, he wanted to shift the subject from because Israel has already taken 53% of Gaza. Because this was always about land theft. They meant to go in there. They meant to steal the land, and we said that at some point during this genocide, and people were outraged, and then what happened? They said, the Israeli side said, they're outrageous. We're not gonna take an inch of land in Gaza. That's an anti-Semitic trope to say that we would start wars to take land. Except that's what 1948 was, that's 1967, that's today, that's Gaza. That's really how Israel got almost all of their land. Oh no, you're not allowed to say things that are true. You should be banned. I'm just sick of the disgusting people like Dave Rubin, who's pro-genocide, pro-land theft, disgustingly racist, and somehow American media painted them as the good guys and painted the Palestinians, their victims of over 75 years now, as the bad guys. As they were brutalized over and over and over again. And now Israel has stolen another portion of land by taking half of Gaza. Yet American press looks at that same debate, Jordan, and thinks that Dave Rubin won. I mean, so Dave Rubin is a clown of all clowns. He lied about us to no end. He's a giant liar, right? And that's what I've been telling you guys from day one, and now the entire internet agrees, left, right, center, doesn't matter. But what's amazing to me is that legacy media looks at that, and everyone online that looked at that debate was like, Piers Morgan annihilated him, right? Mainstream media looks at it and goes, oh yeah, good point. Nothing ever happened, Israel's right about everything. I can't believe Piers Morgan has become an anti-Semite Hamas supporter. I mean, there's a bunch of lunatics who run our corporate media right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few other things that Rubin said that were just so like laughably outlandish. Like, for instance, he said that the Palestinians already have a state. It's called Jordan. He threw around the famous Douglas Murray line. Have you been there a lot? When Pierce would bring up things that are happening in Gaza or made points he didn't like, which, let's note, they never invoke that when they talk about a right-wing cause. For instance, all of this hand-wringing and concern over Christians in Nigeria that has risen to the top levels of the Republican Party and the MAGA movement. No one within their ranks just saying, well, have you been there? As if that's some prerequisite to care about human rights violations and atrocities committed against human beings. No, it's never invoked there. It's only as a deflection point. But then finally, Dave couldn't help but take a shot at you, Jank, and brag about his non-existent debating skills. Take a look.
I will be completely, totally honest with you. About 8 months ago, I basically said to myself, I don't want to do Piers' show anymore because the way the debates go, all of the people, the screaming, the lunatics, the jank, and these awful people, where you have a certain set of people largely on the right who come on that are thoughtful and can explain their ideas, and wajat and all these nutbags. And I really swore it off. And then I did do it again. I did it the day after Charlie died, and I had to demolish jank the way I did with receipts.
With receipts, jank.
All right, yeah, Dave, ask the internet. Okay, whose career is utterly demolished? Who's the laughing stock of the internet? And who won that debate? And you could watch any Piers debate and see who won when I'm on. Okay, but no, look, Jordan, if it was a real contender, this would be an interesting conversation. But Dave's kind of giving me a softball here. I mean, it's not fair to put me up against Dave Rubin because everyone knows he's wrong. That's too low a bar. Give me someone real.
Yeah, it's like dunking on a Fisher-Price hoop. It's not really impressive. It might make you feel a little good, but it's just like, okay, let's go. I mean, he's such an easy target. But you saw that in his conversation with Piers Morgan. It's not just that he can't debate. He just doesn't accept and acknowledge reality. Like this, you can't You're not having a debate when someone says, I've never seen Israel do anything wrong. I mean, he's taken money from foreign governments before. Maybe he's doing it again. Maybe it's just paid propaganda. But we can't discount the fact that, or the possibility that Dave Rubin is just incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
Both of equal likelihood.
Totally. And in fact, in that appearance that he referenced, he's like, he tried to make it seem like we were uniquely against Charlie Kirk, when the main criticism that I took was that I was too agreeable with Charlie Kirk, that I was the only one from the left that Charlie Kirk invited to America Fest. So like his arguments make no logical sense. If you were gonna come at me, you should at least have any kind of semblance of rationality. But to make the very worst argument, oh, the one guy that Charlie Kirk was willing to like bring to his conference from the left is the one who did him the most, that doesn't make any sense. But he's so dumb, he doesn't even know that. He doesn't understand the simplest things. And can I just say though, like to be fair to Dave, half of the Israeli talking points are so preposterous. All you gotta do is just tap them and they'll fall over. Like this, have you been there? Jordan makes a great point. Now just apply it to any other thing. Bashar al-Assad was a butcher in Damascus. He killed so many people in Syria. Imagine if they were like, oh no, he didn't. Well, what do you mean? We have all this reporting from the United Nations and human rights groups, etc. Have you been there? Why did I have to be in Damascus to know that Bashar al-Assad's a terrible guy and trust the reporting of all the other legitimate organizations, the same organizations doing the reporting about Israel? Okay, how about the Armenian genocide? Imagine if the Turks were like, have you been there? Well, how the hell am I supposed to go in the middle of there? Okay, and go back in time travel? No, being there specifically, by the way, on a guided tour that is pure propaganda by the IDF doesn't help at all. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The IDF is like, oh, we'll take you on a tour of Disneyland over here, okay? And you see how we're so wonderful and humanitarian. Shut up, Palestinian, okay, right? Like, come on, go to the West Bank. Are you kidding me? They'd murder me in the West Bank. And they'd say, oh, who cares about that stupid American? Hey, American government, ignore all the Americans we've murdered, okay? And give me another $300 billion. So Dave, we all see you, and we see your beloved Israel and how they've robbed us over and over again, how they use the proceeds of that robbery to commit a genocide. All of this never makes any sense. They're a special ally, doesn't mean anything. It's just a made up term. You could say it about anyone, okay? We have Judeo-Christian heritage. What does that mean? Why does that mean we owe Israel $300 billion? Every one of their talking points is utter crap. It's comically false. The only reason why it has stuck around at all is not because of clowns like Dave Rubin. It's because almost all of legacy media, almost all of cable news repeats those like ridiculous propaganda as if it's true, as if it's like, oh, such a good point. Have you been there? Oh my God, special ally. Or if they're such a special ally, that means we're an ally of theirs. Why don't they give us our $300 billion back? I saw Anna do a story on Ben Shapiro in the last hour. He says, oh no, America's gotten more benefits than Israel has from this relationship. Oh, then great news. Israel can get more benefits than us if they give us our $300 billion back. You wanna do that, Ben? You wanna do that, Dave? Oh, all of a sudden you don't, right? Because who do you actually care about? You care about Israel and you don't give a damn about America, and it's not complicated. And Piers Morgan, way to have an open mind, way to change your mind on this, and way to annihilate Dave Rubin. Great job by Piers Morgan.
Gotta take a break.
Yep, we'll be right back.
My brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
Have you been there?
All right, let's go to Super Chat. Travel the Galaxy says, haven't heard Dave Rubin's name in so long, but just found out apparently blocked me on X/Twitter. I guess I should feel honored. Yeah. All right. R. Stone says, in my 20s, the last thing I want to do was move back to my parents' home. It's amazing that Ben's big brain idea is to create domestic migration crisis because apparently corporations are people. Yeah. I mean, like, with enemies like this, you don't need allies. So, like at this point, I don't even need to debate Dave Rubin or Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro. Just let them talk, and then the American people are repulsed, and they go, "Okay, you're right, and let's move on." Jonathan Borgiani 5473 writes in, "These are now YouTube members. Dave Rubin's an idiot. I'm embarrassed for Piers for going on." No, he did a great job by going on. I like that he did. Haim Bracy or 5097 says Congress needs to subpoena Bannon. I totally agree with that. Steve Bannon's sitting on all these Epstein tapes, and apparently was like buddies with him, like incredibly friendly. So where are the tapes, Steve? Where are the tapes? It's not that hard a question. John Fox 8351 says, I got my birthday tomorrow as well. Stuck doing dinner with people who voted for the hell we're living in. Wish me strength to bite my tongue for my kids. Well, yeah, I wish you strength, but it's okay. Don't remember, brother. Don't take it out on the voters. Voters on our side got duped by people like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, etc. Right? They never had any good intentions for us, but a lot of us, or almost all of us, voted for them. Right? And same thing for the guys who voted for Trump. They heard a lot of BS in their media. We heard a lot of BS in our media. So take it out on the leadership, the powerful, not each other, okay? Balk says, I haven't been to Dave's side of YouTube for a while now. I haven't been over to Dave's page for so long, I don't even know how he got to this position. Bro fell off. He did, but I mean, he was never on in the first place. Like the main thing that Dave got famous off of is leaving here and then talking crap about us. And one of the original reasons I got mad at Joe Rogan was because Dave Rubin went on there and told like half a dozen outrageous, totally made up lies about us. And Rogan's like, wow, I didn't know they were that bad and stuff. And I was like, what are you doing? What is this? Why don't you bring me on and I'll tell you what actually happened. But this Dave Rubin lied about us all over the internet for year after year after year, supported by other folks, that had an agenda. And none of it was ever true. He's a despicable, totally immoral person. Dev0094 says, when Piers Morgan is making sense, that's how you know our world has been flipped upside down. Art Guy says, I've never heard Cenk laugh with such pure joy as when he heard Dave Rubin say he demolished him, with receipts, of course. Look, all this stuff's on tape. That's why it's funny. Like anybody could watch any of those debates, even the ones like if you were right wing or independent, you thought, oh, I heard Cenk lost. You go back and watch that, my debate with Ben Shapiro, with Dave Rubin, with any of them, you're like, holy cow, he annihilated them. All right, back on TYT, Cenk Jordan and Shafu V, thank you for joining. We appreciate it. Hit that beautiful join button below. Become one of us. Jordan, what's next?
Take a look at this.
I do think, by the way, the best person to fight back on the woke right, so to speak, is Ben Shapiro and his folks and his Congressman Randy Fine from Florida and his Senator David Cormier from Pennsylvania and his Senator Cruz from Texas. People on the right need to lead the fight against anti-Semitism in the right.
Recently, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, listed several Republicans who could fight off the so-called woke right. One of them was Representative Randy Fine of Florida. And he just introduced a bill to fight anti-Semitism in schools, but his bill doesn't just have to do with animus or hatred or bigotry toward Jewish Americans. It also cracks down on criticism of Israel's government. Cenk, what are your 2 cents there?
First of all, I still held out like 1% hope in Jonathan Greenblatt because ADL has done some good things in the past. Oh, that's gone now. I mean, he didn't just say Ben Shapiro, he said Randy Fine. Randy Fine has said multiple times that we should murder everyone in Gaza. I mean, he's a Hitler equivalent, and the Anti-Defamation League is saying, yeah, there we go, murder all the Palestinians. And your claim that you are against bigotry? Well, there's not a bigger bigot in the country than Randy Fine. And now to this bill that he's introduced, it's to take away our freedoms, all Americans, and make us shut up if we criticize Israel. And anyone who votes for this is a traitor, okay? And I don't mean it in like the hyperbolic way. I just mean like philosophically, ideologically, hates the idea of America, believes that Israel should dominate us and that we should never be allowed to speak against that superior country. That's Randy Fine's bill. Here, Jordan, explain it.
Yeah, well, Fine recently introduced the No Anti-Semitism in Education Act, and he explained it in a statement. For years, universities have built entire bureaucracies to police every form of bigotry except the one Jews actually face. If you target a student because they are Jewish, it will be treated the same way as if you targeted them because they are Black, Hispanic, or Asian. I passed this law in Florida because Jewish students were being targeted and no one was doing enough. Today, Jewish students across America face the same threat. I have a bill that works. Florida proves it. So what exactly would Fine's bill do? It states that public schools and higher education institutions must punish incidents of anti-Semitism with the same severity as any kind of racial discrimination. If the schools refuse to do so, they will lose access to federal funds. Now let's take a look at some of the examples of what Fine defines as anti-Semitism. You'll note that some of these examples have to do with Jewish people, while others mainly concern the state of Israel. Calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews, often in the name of radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. Demonizing Israel, or by using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism to characterize Israel or Israelis, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, or blaming Israel for all interreligious or political tensions, applying a double standard to Israel by requiring behavior of Israel that is not expected or demanded of any other democratic country, or focusing peace or human rights investigations only on Israel, delegitimizing Israel by denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination and denying Israel the right to exist. The bill ends by noting that it is not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel in the same way one might criticize any other country. Cenk, do you think that having a bill like this is helpful, hurtful? It's, to me, it seems like a lot of this stuff is filler for a broader project and doesn't really get to the root of something that should be about behavior in schools.
First of all, what I've already said in this video would be banned under this bill. So if it was said on a college campus. So because Randy Fine said we should starve all of the Palestinians in Gaza, that's 2 million people. He also said at a different time we should nuke Gaza and kill all 2 million people. And that's why I compared him to Hitler earlier in this video. Hitler said we should kill all the Jews. Randy Fine is saying we should kill all the Palestinians in Gaza. But that speech would be banned. You wouldn't be allowed to criticize Randy Fine or Israel in that way because they get special rules. It's freedom of speech, but now in the Constitution, I wonder if they have to actually go in and literally put in an asterisk unless you criticize Israel. So this is all absurdity. So if you're on a college campus, we can debate whether there should be any kind of racial harassment rules, speech guidelines, etc. But if you want to say, hey, same thing should apply for blacks, whites, Jews, Christians, Muslims, okay, no problem. But when you want to get into Israel, a government, what is, that's crazy. Imagine if they were like, okay, you're not allowed to say anything that is racially insensitive towards black students on campus or about Nigeria. You'd be like, what? What does Nigeria have anything to do with this? Okay, let's make it more specific, okay? You're not allowed to say anything bad about Muslim students, right? Whatever, specific language you want to use to describe bad, right? And you're also not allowed to criticize Saudi Arabia. Everybody be like, what are you talking about? What, I don't even understand what you're saying. What an absurd, preposterous thing. No, criticizing the Saudis is the equivalent of criticizing Muslims. And if you're going to criticize Saudi Arabia, you have to criticize every other country on earth the same exact way. If you don't, it's a double standard, that's it, you're banned. You're banned, you're banned, you're banned. You speak against Israel in any way, shape, or form, you're banned, okay? Well, no, the answer is no. This is an attempt to control America, to control our college campuses. And yes, it is done by forces inside America that are loyal to Israel. Now they would say that statement right there is also, oh no, trope, you're not allowed to say those things. In fact, we'd like to ban you, which they've said to me many times, because we're not in control. Well, wait a minute. You literally want to control our speech on college campus and not allow anyone to criticize the country you care most about, which is not America. This is not a don't criticize America bill. This is a don't criticize Israel bill. And you want us to pass this piece of trash, this unconstitutional, un-American bill on behalf of who? Norway? Peru? No, on behalf of the country you actually care about, which is Israel. If someone did this same exact, I'm Turkish origin, right? If someone did this exact bill about Turkey, I would say, are you out of your mind? Are you a lunatic? What do you mean they can't criticize the Turkish government? That's the same thing as being racist against Turks. No, it's not. I criticize the Turkish government. Turks criticize the Turkish government. Israelis criticize the Israeli government, and sometimes in the ways that this bill describes. So are Israelis anti-Semites? No, this is an attempt for the folks who care more about Israel in this country to try to control the rest of us and to get us to shut up and follow their orders and keep sending them money to Israel. Well, we're not gonna do it, Randy Fine. I don't care if you pass that bill. And by the way, good, vote on it. I wanna see who the traitors are. The people who say, no, we should serve Israel and not America. Please get them on the record. I would love it, okay? And I'm sure AIPAC and Jonathan Greenblatt and all those guys will shovel hundreds of millions of dollars more to bribe them. And yes, that's what campaign contributions are. When Big Pharma does it, defense contractor does it, or the Israeli lobby does it. The morons, the despicable propagandists in corporate media come on the air and on cable news and pretend that our politicians are not affected by the hundreds of millions of dollars that the Israeli lobby has given to all these members in Congress so that they serve Israel and restrict our speech and say, you better muzzle those Americans. Get the Americans under control, okay? Oh, but you're not allowed to say that. But wait, if you're not the boss of me, then I'm allowed to say anything I like. Either you're the boss of me and you're gonna get me to shut up, or you're not gonna pass this bill. Which one is it? Okay, yeah. No, the answer should be hell no to all these Israel first clowns who say that we have to listen to another country. No, we don't. No, we don't. It's a giant lie to get all of us to serve Israel. I'm sick of it. And I don't want to give them another $300 billion. I don't want to authorize another genocide. I don't want to, we gave $31 billion for them to slaughter the Palestinians and to complete this genocide. And Randy Fine loved it. The only problem he had was that we didn't murder enough Palestinians. Randy Fine is the very worst of us. And the people that are participating in that Israeli lobby, I'm sorry guys, but you're giving money so that our government can finance a genocide. That is disgusting, and that is against every fiber of Jewish culture and Judaism. You are betraying your own religion, your own culture, deeply by doing this, and you should be filled with shame.
Got to take a break.
All right, let's go to our members. Navinix writes in, if you don't enjoy turkey at dinner tomorrow, you're anti-Turk and thereby anti-Muslim. If the Turks did the same thing as the Israelis, they would make insane arguments like that. And then if you didn't follow along, they'd be like, Trump, eliminate him from the national conversation, opposing Turkey like that. Next thing you know, he's gonna be against the turkey club sandwich. Anti-Turkist. Jumpin' Jank Fly says, the Anti-Defamation League is actually just Anti-Jewish Defamation League. They're fine with defamation against anyone else, especially Muslims. Look, I almost wish that was true. That's not even true. Defamation, they're like anti-correct criticism of Israel League. I wish they protect the Jews. They don't care about Jews at all. They'll attack other Jews who are criticizing Israel. So they're the worst. They're what a fraudulent organization, absolutely destroyed by Jonathan Greenblatt. It wasn't always fraudulent. Like I said, it's done good work in the past, really good work in the past. No, Jonathan Greenblatt and the pro-Netanyahu people came in, the pro-genocide freaks that now are like the top of the Israeli lobby in this country, came in chanting genocide, 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 let's kill more Muslims. That's who you are, Jonathan Greenblatt. Advocating for the murder of 20,000 children. Go ahead, trope. You can take that trope and shove it all the way up your ass, okay? How about you won't face any trope charges or anybody doing trope or anything like that if you stop murdering Palestinian children to steal more of their land. Tell me you didn't take 53% of Gaza. Tell me Israel's gonna give back half of Gaza that they stole. No, they're not gonna give it back. They have no plans on giving it. Tell me that they're going to give a Palestinian state. No, Israel voted that there is never going to be a Palestinian state because they're racist, they're bigots, and you love to defend them, Jonathan, because you're a bigot. You should create the pro-bigotry league and head that, because that's who you are. You're a disgusting bigot against Muslims, and you advocate for their murder 24/7 and pretend to run an anti-bigotry group. I'm sick of all of these Israel first guys saying it's okay to murder Muslims. It's totally okay. In fact, America should pay to murder more Muslims, the most bigoted people in the whole country. I hope I'm being clear. You frickin' bigots, you're racist, pro-genocide freaks. Stop making us pay for you wanting to murder more Muslims and steal more of their land. All right, if that's not true, if I'm doing a trope, then give Gaza back. Give the 53% back. Oh, you're not gonna do that, are you? Give the West Bank back. You stole that in 1967 when Israel attacked all of its neighbors. You stole the Sinai Peninsula, you stole the Golan Heights, you stole Israel. You were, at the time, they had 6% of the land. Then 48%, how did 6 go to 48? They slaughtered the Palestinians and dragged them through the middle of town. That's why 800,000 Palestinians ran for their lives during the Nakba. You think they just went for a picnic like the liars Jonathan Greenblatt talks about? No, they murdered them and stole their land. That's reality. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Chang and Jordan with you guys, more news.
The DOJ just admitted that the decision to ignore a judge's ruling calling for the halt of a deportation flight to El Salvador came from Kristi Noem herself. Now, this is a massive story, which was first reported by NBC News, and we'll get into the details momentarily. But Jank, first, your 2 cents here. You have the DOJ admitting that it came from the top.
Look, I don't know if there are any laws left in this country, but when a government official, a cabinet member admits, yeah, I ignored a court order, there used to be severe consequences for that, legal consequences. Now, I don't know if there's gonna be any consequences, or is this White House above the law? So let's figure it out.
Yeah, well, let's get into the facts here. So on March 15th, US District Judge James Boasberg ordered the government to return Venezuelan immigrants the government alleged were members of Tren de Aragua back to the United States. In the same written order, he blocked the Trump administration from deporting another group of immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act. In a court filing this week, Department of Justice officials acknowledged that they relayed the order and provided legal advice to the acting general counsel for the Department of Homeland Security, who conveyed that advice as well as his own to Noem. Noem then decided that detainees under the Alien Enemies Act who were removed from the United States before the court's order could be transferred to El Salvador. Boasberg barred the administration from deporting alleged Tren de Aragua members using the Wartime Alien Enemies Act in March, saying the deportees most likely did not receive due process. The administration executed flights carrying deportees under the act anyway. Now, last week, the same judge revived criminal contempt proceedings against members of the Trump administration over its willful disregard of his order. This new report also highlights another incident that we covered a few months ago when it was revealed that Principal Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove was alleged to have instructed subordinates to ignore court rulings, a charge he denies. The Trump administration is fighting back against Boasberg's contempt proceedings, but an appeals court gave him the green light to proceed earlier this month, so we'll watch as this case develops. But Jank, do you think there will be any repercussions for the administration?
Who's going to do the repercussions? So we're now in a situation where we might have this insane constitutional clash, and I don't know how it will be resolved. So, okay. So the judge is saying you can't be in contempt of my orders, which makes sense. That's exactly the law in this country and what we always know. And if you're in contempt of court, it could have legal consequences, including actually going to jail, right? Here, the Department of Homeland Security chief, Kristi Noem, is saying, yeah, I'm in contempt, so what? Yeah, you told me to turn the plane around and I didn't. And I gave them an order to ignore your order. Well, you can't ignore a court order. That's not legal. That's not our system. So, for example, Biden did student debt relief, and the courts knocked down a huge portion of it. I'm massively in favor of student debt relief. I would not have counseled Biden, who cares about the courts? So what? Just give them the debt relief anyway. Because that's not how the laws are. Then you'd be in contempt, and we have a constitutional problem when the other branches don't listen to a ruling of the judiciary. So is Kristi Noem going to then accept the responsibility and have legal consequences? My guess is no. So then if this goes all the way to the conclusion of these court proceedings, and they say, yes, that cabinet member is in contempt and should go to jail, what are we gonna do? I mean, I don't think Kristi Noem is going to volunteer to go to jail. Who in the executive branch is going to arrest the head of Department of Homeland Security? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see as this appeals process pans out. It could make its way to the Supreme Court. I think once it gets there, then they admit that they're fine. Nothing will happen. So, yeah, I think it reflects a deeper problem in our system, Cenk. What's the point of even pretending like we have a democracy if you have the administration openly defying and acknowledging that they defied a court order in a legal filing? Yeah, we did that. What are you going to do about it? Essentially, like, none of this works. This all works when we all agree to participate, adhere to the rules, adhere to the standards, adhere to the process, and respect it. And you have one side saying, no, we're just going to do our own thing, and then recoil at mass mobilizations like the No Kings protest. How could they? We don't have a king. Everything you're doing shows that you want one. This is a movement in advance of actually having one. And just it's insulting to see them routinely scoff at the idea that we are on the path toward authoritarianism. You have the DOJ clearly weaponized, clearly politicized, acting at the direction of the president, which is a huge concern, and now saying, yeah, we ignored a court order. None of this is going to work unless we all agree to participate, win or lose.
Yeah, last things, guys. The court is saying you've got to follow due process That's why the core of the case is about, in the beginning was to bring them back because we don't know if you have the right guys. And by the way, it turned out they didn't have some of the right guys. That's why we do due process. We figure out, hey, are we deporting the right people? Are they actually criminals? If they are, no problem, we deport them. But if you got the wrong guys, that's what the courts are supposed to adjudicate. And the Trump administration was like, we don't care about due process. That was early on. Now they're saying we don't care about due process when they're killing people. Those are the boat strikes off the coast of Venezuela. And we don't even know the names of the people we're killing. Some of them are from different countries, are not at all drug dealers. And sometimes we've captured them and then returned them to their home countries because it turns out they weren't drug dealers at all. And we were going to kill them. We killed the other people on their boat. There's a reason why we follow due process. It's a core tenet, not just of America, but of Western civilization. So this administration is saying, no, we don't care about due process and we're not gonna listen to the courts. And that's an enormous problem. So lastly, I hope that if it gets to the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court, my guess is they will find a way to make it so that she doesn't have to face legal consequences, but it becomes clear that this is not acceptable. You must go through the courts. If the Supreme Court gives away its own power like that, then we're in a lot of trouble. But my guess is they will protect their own power while somehow splitting the baby and not putting Kristi Noem in legal jeopardy. They oftentimes make political decisions like that and contort the law to make it political so that they don't get into a constitutional crisis, because they order the arrest of a cabinet member and the executive branch doesn't do it. We're in a massive constitutional crisis. So probably won't get to that, I hope, but they have to get back to following the law and the judiciary. If they don't, then we're gonna have as big a problem as this country's ever had. Okay, we gotta go. Jordan, happy Thanksgiving, brother. Have a great Thanksgiving, appreciate you. Everybody go out there, but don't eat turkey because that'll be anti-Turkist, okay? And you'll get canceled for that. All right, I'm playing. I'm gonna take a break here, but I'm gonna come back. I got an amazing interview for you guys. It's a guy who was in the Kamala Harris campaign, worked for Jill Biden, Gavin Newsom, Dianne Feinstein. Wait till you see what he thinks today. We'll do that when we return. Welcome to the RevolYOUtion. It's a show where we try to figure out what's going wrong in the country and fix it peacefully, non-violently. All right, now we are joined by Charlie Golden Sun, which is kind of a super badass name. The Golden Sun part, not the Charlie part. He's a fascinating character. Currently, he's advisor in office to the office of the CEO of Jose Andres Group. So that. It's a twist. Executive producer of paid media for Harris for President. Interesting. Special assistant to the chief of staff for the office of the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. Also digital director for Jill Biden, research fellow for Gavin Newsom, constituent service representative for Dianne Feinstein. Fascinating resume there, Charlie. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I think Charlie is a pretty badass name too, though. I'll say that.
Charlie is a fun name. It is. I know a couple of Charlies, and it's fun every time. So I'll give that to you. Way better than Charles. So I agree that Charlie's the right way to go.
Charles is my legal name, but I've never gone by it. So
yeah, Charles feels British. Charlie feels American.
I agree.
All right. So your resume indicates establishment dude 101. So what happened? Because I've seen your videos and you sound like a progressive populist now. So, so what was your experience like inside the machine?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say like, it's funny you say that. I was talking about with my dad the other day, exactly that. My whole career has been, for the most part, basically within the upper echelon / like highest levels of the Democratic machine. But my background and where I come from has always become hyper progressive, I would say socialist adjacent. The family I grew up in is very progressive. My dad was a Marxist activist. My mom, ran Planned Parenthood. So my whole childhood and upbringing was always hyper progressive, and so were my politics. And I'll just add that, not to blow smoke, but the Young Turks, when I was in college, I graduated in 2016, which is the same time as when Bernie was running his first presidential. Like the Young Turks were a extremely important piece of my own political, not just awakening, but bringing me into the political arena. I didn't plan on working in politics. My family had always been hyper political, but I never thought of it as a career. And kind of the combination of Bernie running with my own, me finding TYT and really understanding and finding what I felt like was a digital progressive media community, like that is what brought me into politics in the first place. So that all being said, the first job I got out of college was a staffer for Dianne Feinstein. Obviously not a progressive icon necessarily, but as a 22-year-old kid looking for a foot into the political space, especially while at that time Trump was running, that was like a dream opportunity. And I grew up in San Francisco too. That's the other thing. I'm a local kid from San Francisco. Dianne Feinstein was always like, and remained kind of like the mayor of San Francisco, even when she was long past her city hall. And that's really what got me in the door into that establishment space. When Dianne Feinstein decided to run again, when she was close to 90, that's when I decided to leave. And where I went from there was to Los Angeles, because I really understood when I was in the Senate, again, TYT being a significant portion of this learning, that Senate staffers, congressional staffers are paid a tiny amount of money, and therefore the predominant, kind of power players and folks in the ears of these decision makers tend to be really young staffers. And where are those staffers getting their media? They're not necessarily reading the New York Times or the Examiner. They're watching videos on YouTube, on Facebook video. They're consuming content from TYT. They're consuming content from Vice, Now This, Attention, ATTN. And so I ended up actually moving down to LA because I was really interested in that. I wanted to understand, how can you create media, progressive leaning media that really shapes the understandings of the decision makers guiding the decision makers. And so again, though, when I was in LA, the folks that we were working with at Attention, I ended up being like functionally the chief of staff at Attention. I kind of like ran the political arm there after 3 years. We were working with all of the presidential candidates. This was in the 2020 primaries, Democratic primaries. We had Biden's team coming to us. We had Bernie's team coming to us. We had Warren's team coming to us. We had Yang's team coming to us. We had Booker's team coming to us. Klobuchar, Hickenlooper, like everybody. And so I just, even though my own personal politics were very lefty, professionally, I was being plugged in to kind of advise and write and produce for these very establishment, more liberal candidates. And the Bidens actually asked me to leave that job to come be a digital director for them. This was during the primaries, and I turned them down because I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I was volunteering every weekend. I was knocking doors for him. You know, I was always kind of jealous because we got to touch Bernie at attention, but we never really got to help as much as I wanted to because frankly, his campaign knew what they were doing. They didn't need our help compared to a lot of the other establishment candidates. So I didn't get to work with them as much. So I turned Biden down. He wasn't my horse, right? I thought he was going to lose. I wanted Bernie. But they ended up coming back to me after that Super Tuesday, after Bernie lost and after Biden won the primary and said, what about now? And at that point, I felt like, you know what, screw it. All hands on deck to beat a fascist. Like, I'll absolutely come do this. And so that's when I kind of entered the Biden orbit, which was a completely new chapter in the establishment realm of politics.
So Charlie, let's pause there for a sec. So first of all, thank you for what you said about the network. I appreciate it. And it's, we get a lot of heat here, right? And so it's nice to hear every once in a while that we do something positive in the world. I appreciate you. Okay, so now you dealt with Feinstein. You were relatively, new staffer, young guy, etc. Now you go to work for Jill Biden at the White House. Now this is serious stuff now. So I'm super curious. What was your experience inside that machine?
Yeah. So the majority of my time was on the campaign and on the transition, and the timing of that was. Like I said, I came in after the primaries, right after the primaries. So I came in after all the dollars from all the other Democratic candidates started to come together behind the Bidens. Like that's right when I joined, and that timing also lined up with COVID, which was I moved to Philly at first, thinking I was going to be based in Philly because that's where campaign HQ was. But very quickly, a week in, as I was still isolating for COVID. They called me and said, change of plans, like you're moving to Delaware and you're going to be in the nucleus of this campaign. Meaning, at that point there were maybe thousands of staffers on the campaign. I'm not quite sure what the number was, but there was 11 of us, I think roughly 11 of us, who were basically chosen to live in almost like a guest house of the Bidens off their property, but very close by. And we became kind of the core nucleus of the traveling staff for the Bidens. I was on Dr. Biden's team. I was running her digital programming, content, messaging, brand, et cetera. There was another kind of travel unit for the vice president at the time, Joe Biden. And so, to be honest, my experience was not like a traditional campaign experience because it wasn't just me going into HQ every day and churning workout. I was like, we all had to wear all these different hats because of COVID. So my job was, of course, running her digital stuff, but it was also walking her dogs and hanging out with them at their Delaware house while it rained, having a bottle of wine and talking about what the transition was going to be. So it was a combination of like insanity, sprinting around the country every day, 18-hour days, but also like extremely personal, also getting to know that family very well. And I'd say, like, to answer your question more specifically, again, my relationship with Joe Biden was he probably knew my face. I was around his house all the time, right? He would give me a huh. That's how he would kind of acknowledge me. I don't think he knew my name, but Dr. Biden and I were very close, super close. And so it was a very personal relationship. Yeah. And I think what always surprised me about her the most, frankly, again, just being transparent, was like with him, I always felt like it was very clear who he was. It was very clear that this is somebody who had been in a position of power and basically removed from the real world for 40 years. Like he respectfully hadn't touched grass in a long time. Dr. Biden didn't feel that way to me. She felt like a human being, somebody could introduce to me as her mother or her aunt. And I'd say that makes complete sense. So that was my kind of relationship there. And then we won, moved into the transition, got into the White House. I was in the White House pretty briefly. I left pretty early on. It just wasn't really for me. That, again, my goal in joining the campaign was not to be a White House staffer. My goal in joining that campaign was to beat Trump. And so once I got in there, you know, it was an amazing opportunity, an amazing place to be. But there was a lot of people in there who had spent their whole careers trying to get there. And that just wasn't me. My goal was never to make it to the White House. And my politics didn't really align either. So it was an amazing experience that I was grateful for. It was an insane look inside the machine. I still, you know, benefit professionally from being in that still. But I kind of got in there and got out of there. Yeah.
So Charlie, you had a kind of a unique experience there because you're mainly on the campaign, so you're not going to get to see much of the nitty gritty of the legislating, right, and the policy, and that's where we have most of the issues, right? So between that and your experience in Kamala Harris, so one last thing here, did you get any sense of like the, for lack of a better word, and since you had a personal relationship, it's really tough because I bet, you know, on a personal level, it'd be so weird to be inauthentic, right? But like my number one issue with establishment Democrats is that I don't think that they mean anything. Like they don't mean a word of it. They don't want to pass minimum wage increase. They don't want to pass paid family leave. They don't want to pass any of these bills. That's why they never try, right? So from your experience, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth because you might not have seen any of that, right? Yeah. But did you get any sense of that inauthenticity or no?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Again, like I would base that less off of like my time in the White House was so brief. I don't want to like I don't know, right? I was in the East Wing. I was like not dealing with policy. I just wasn't. However, I spent a lot of time with them. I spent time on the Kamala Harris campaign as a senior advisor for paid media. What I can tell you is like, and maybe this is a transition to the campaign stuff, is like the inauthenticity is real, but I think so much of that is driven by the consultant class, right? Like so much of that, especially with these older establishment Democrats who have just been in this machine forever. And I'm not justifying it or excusing that behavior, but the reality is you know, so many of these people and these principals have surrounded themselves with loyalists for so long who, for the most part, have made their careers off of paid media buys, right? Like they don't even understand the media ecosystem that they exist in anymore. And they're wealthy, they're elitist, and they also haven't touched grass. So I think one of the problems is this kind of like snowballing effect of not only are these politicians starting off as somewhat inauthentic, wishy-washy, no real policy agenda to begin with, but a lot of them were also surrounding themselves with consultants and advisors who were always guiding them right back to the middle, right? And because these people had only been in that space for so long, they didn't know any better. They didn't know who else to go to, or they didn't trust them, or the voices who were telling them to move in a certain direction, which frankly, like that was my job, right? Like that's how I always viewed myself, was like I got into this space and I was the one always screaming and yelling and trying to drag people in my direction. We were never the most senior peoples in the rooms, right? Or we were made fun of or laughed at it or told that our opinions were a joke, or that's why I'm the California kid and not the DC kid. So yeah, I think there's a ton of inauthenticity there, but I think it's layered, right? It doesn't just come from them being disconnected. It's also kind of the infrastructure that they built around themselves that just perpetuates that inauthenticity.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Okay, so now you're out in the non-political world to some degree, but you're making videos, and I want to show one of them because they're fun, they're interesting. I think you're good at it. So you made one about Sarah Hurwitz. So for folks who might not remember that name, we covered her a couple of days ago or at the end of last week, and she's the one that worked, I believe, in the Obama administration and came out and said we might have taught the wrong lessons about the Holocaust, because now people are saying, well, it was like weak, emaciated Jews who were being killed by the strong Nazis, but now we have the strong Israelis, killing the weak, emaciated Palestinians, and well, you got the wrong lesson. You should kill them. It's like, what? That's wow, right? She didn't say literally you should kill them, but that was clearly where she was driving with it, that we should not judge Israel for doing similar things. Anyway, here's a video that Charlie made about it.
So that's Sarah Hurwitz. She's a former speechwriter for Michelle Obama, and I'm going to try to be kind here. I really am. Please ignore this out of my nose. There's 1,000 things wrong with what she says in that video. I think we can all agree on that. It's kind of terrifying and scary and horrifying and disgusting what she says, but I want to focus on one thing, and that's this. Look at this message that I got in response to me sharing that video on my story, okay? Take a look. Now, I responded to this person and said, Zionists, you meant Zionists. And the person said, oh my God, you're right, I'm so sorry. But here's the thing, I can't actually blame that person. I can't blame that person for getting it wrong, because that's what happens when people, specifically Zionists, use Judaism as a defense for genocide.
So Charlie, you said there something that I've been, alluding to for a long time on the show, which is stop equating Jews with Israel. You're doing so much damage. But I'm not Jewish, you are, so you speak with more authority in that regard, I guess. I mean, that's how we play this game. So Charlie, what do you think of? Elaborate more on what Sarah said and why you think it's damage.
Yeah, well, I'll say quickly, just take one step back. I want to be clear, I am actually still in politics. I still work as a political consultant and advisor to candidates and organizations. So I just want to put that out there. The content is kind of downstream from that. The content started as me being furious with our inability to message properly, me just feeling like, all right, I'll try doing this myself. So that being said, yeah, I mean, I think like I'm a Jew. I grew up in a Jewish family. We are not the most religious. For us, Judaism is hyper cultural. My grandfather was the lead psychiatrist at the Nuremberg trials. Like, we were deeply connected to the Holocaust. We have deep understanding of what genocide means and what it looks like. For me, Judaism was always deeply tied to a culture of fighting back against oppression, of standing up when things are unjust. And so from the get-go in the last 3 years, this is, for so many Jews on this side of history, like, this has just been an excruciating and confusing and challenging time, especially when, I've never personally, especially as like a, at least white appearing dude, I've never had to really deal with issues around my race or my sexuality or my religion, even being Jewish. It's never been an issue. And for the first time, having to really feel like, okay, this part of me, this part of my culture, of my family that I've always had immense pride in, is being weaponized to defend a genocide objectively. This is something that has been stated by some of the most professional and verified organizations around the world, is horrifying and terrifying. And not only is it horrifying and terrifying, but it makes Jews more at risk. It makes anti-Semitism go up, not down, in my view. I think it is impossible to say that, there is rising anti-Semitism in this country. That is a fact that cannot be argued. However, I also think you can't say that is probably has some connection to the atrocities that the government of Israel is committing, right? And when they are using the religion of Judaism to defend those atrocities. And so I just feel like, I have a bit of a platform. I'm confident in my opinion. I'm not scared to hold back. Like, I'm happy to call people out on this right now, because especially, you probably couldn't see it in the video, but what I was showing was a message I got of somebody that responded to me trying to be positive, saying, oh, well, now the Jews are blaming the Holocaust, blah, blah, blah. And I had to say to them, no, this isn't Jews. This Zionists, in my view, are doing this. And they're like, oh, right, I'm so sorry. And so of course it's confusing for people. Of course people are struggling to understand the difference between Zionism and Judaism when there are people like Sarah, former Obama admin staffers, on stage saying this stuff over and over and over. And it's only dangerous for everybody. It doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, I feel like the only people that are saying what Israel's doing equals all Jews are either the Groypers on the right, or the Israel First guys that are like, yeah, no, let's hide behind, let's use Jews as human shields. Don't.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I think about the ADL. I think about Jonathan Greenblatt, where I'm like, how dare you use my name to defend your positions on this, right? Like, it's shocking. They go, the ADL, for folks who haven't seen this, probably many of your listeners have. A couple of weeks ago, after Zoran won, right? Like, they put out like a public tracker to track like all of the I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like the dangers or risks, policy risks that Zoran and his team were putting out that would put New York Jews at risk. Well, like, you know what they haven't built trackers for? Are like the shit that Nick Fuentes says about Jews or Tucker Carlson. They've never made any trackers for that. And this is a Jewish organization. So yeah, I'm totally with you. It's ridiculous.
I mean, Jonathan Greenblatt defended Elon Musk after Elon Musk did what I hope was a trolling. I mean, weird to attach the word hope to anything he did in that regard, but that trolling like Nazi salute that he did, right? And he's like, oh, it's fine, it's fine. You're pro-Israel? Totally fine, totally fine. No, you're missing the frickin' point. Anyways, so, but one more question about that, Charlie, because I think it's so important. There seems to be a kind of an age divide now in the Jewish community in America, where it's I saw in one of the polls 2/3 of young Jewish voters in New York were voting for Zoran. And by the way, a huge percentage overall of Jewish Americans were voting for Zoran in New York. But yes, some of the older folks are still attached to Israel and think Israel can do no wrong. So how's that going? Because I'm not inside that community, so I only know it through friends.
Yeah, so I would say the first thing that comes to mind with that, and I would say like I used to live in DC. Obviously, I've been living in New York the last 5 years. So my family, my dad is from New York. My family is still on the Upper West Side. Like we are a Jewish New York family. We're okay. We're safe. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is I think that you cannot have this conversation about the Jewish voter turnout numbers in the New York mayoral election without also talking about the insane, bigoted, paid advertising campaign that the Cuomo team put out in that last 2-month sprint, right? Like they were dumping tens of millions of dollars in both campaign money and super PAC money into literally, of course, calling Zoran a jihadist and whatever else they want to call them, but literally targeting New York Jews, specifically elder Jews, telling them specifically, this man is a danger to your friggin' life, right? And I think that was effective. Like, I think that was very effective. And so I just think that like it's not just about Israel. This isn't just about entrenched feelings of Jews in New York or older Jews or, as Sarah Hurwitz says, the TikTokification of media consumption and our access to like videos of genocide. It's also about people like Jonathan Greenblatt. It's also about people like Andrew Cuomo and his consultants who are actively choosing to pour gasoline on the fire of the fears of older Jews who are rightfully nervous, right? Like nobody should say that you shouldn't be nervous about rising anti-Semitism, but when you're getting hit over and over and over with TV ads and YouTube pre-roll ads telling you that the mayor of New York is going to bring another 9/11 and this time it's going to be focused on Jews, of course that's going to have impact, right? So I just think that like that has to be talked about when we talk about the turnout numbers of this election, because I think Cuomo and his team did serious political, social, and like moral damage that now it falls on Zoran's team and his administration to kind of clean up.
Yeah, but how about on Israel? Is there the divide that I'm seeing through friends and family between the young and the old?
Generationally? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'd say like anecdotally, it absolutely feels that way. Totally. I mean, I grew up in a family that was like my immediate family were, frankly, like I grew up very aware of what Israel was doing. I don't know if we would call ourselves anti-Zionist, but maybe we would call ourselves an anti-Zionist family always. So I feel like I always was on this side and aware of this. But I also have family members who are on the other side. That being said, the majority of my Jewish friends are absolutely on the side that I'm on. There's a few outliers here and there, but yeah, anecdotally from my own perspective, I think it is. And I think to Sarah Hurwitz's point, which again is the Obama speechwriter, she's right about one thing, which is that because of TikTok or YouTube or Meta or whatever, that young people are having more access to the visuals, not just the visuals of genocide that Israel is unleashing on the people of Palestine, but also to independent media, to independent voices. What I would disagree with Sarah is that she blames TikTok for that instead of blaming Israel, right? Like in my mind, digital media has democratized media. And of course, social media has a lot of problems. I'm not arguing that. There's a lot of negatives here too. But on the positive side, it has democratized media so that young people who are on social media have more access to the world around them and are not as prone maybe to the pre-generational propaganda that, our parents or grandparents were consuming. Yeah. And so Yeah, and we know, there's organizing happening online. There's organizing happening on TikTok and on Instagram, on et cetera. So I think there is a generational divide, and I think it absolutely has to do with the type of access and the imagery and the information sharing that younger generations have access to now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's not about just Jewish community; it's every community.
Totally.
So when you talk about like the Turkish community, is there, as you put it, it's a really interesting phrase you use: generational propaganda. Absolutely. And the older generation grew up on propaganda, so they literally think that that's the truth. I mean, to the point where I've told the story many times on the air. When I was in Turkey, Charlie, I grew up there until I was 8. They taught us that the Turks had never lost a war other than World War I. And as a kid, I internalized that, and I really believed that. And I was in college, and I read this story of a battle of many, right? That the Turks lost. And I was like, that can't be true because the Turks have never. And then I paused. I was like, oh my God, that was such obvious propaganda, right? But you don't know that if that's all you've ever learned. Right, so you're 100% right about TikTok, and everything else is actually showing you the reality instead of the propaganda.
If I could say one thing really quickly, to I have to, I also, again, I don't view it as an excuse or justification, but there is people who grew up in hyper-Zionist communities or synagogues. I do think there needs to be some, now I understand that we're many years late to this, so I'm not saying they need this amount of time. But I think people outside that world don't quite understand the programming that's happened, right? And therefore the deprogramming that's required for a lot of people in those communities. And I think it's easier for younger people to do that because they've spent less time on it. But for older generations, it's not just that they've been consuming media, it's that their entire communities and for many people, their entire systems of faith have been consumed by this worldview too. And it's hard to deprogram that, right? It's a lifetime of learning, trying to kind of take away. So yeah.
No, Charlie, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let me double down again with the example of the Turkish community, right? So when you tell Turks that about the Armenian genocide, they're not going to believe you under any circumstance, because their entire life, not just their education, but their community and their culture was the Armenian genocide didn't happen. And it's funny you mentioned it today because it triggered for me the thought. I remember we were taught that the Armenians, because this was a quote taken from an American colonel, which I realized later probably got contracts from the Turkish or Ottoman government later, right? And why he wrote this absurd thing. He wrote that the Armenians had returned fat and entirely unmassacred. And earlier today on the Young Turks, we covered a story of Dave Rubin talking about how the Palestinians were entirely unmassacred and were even fat. So it's the same exact thing, both about genocides, and when it's your own identity, people get dug in, and unfortunately, the older they are, not all the time at all, but overall, generally and on average, they get dug in more. And so it isn't about Jewish folks, it isn't about Turkish folks, it isn't about any race or religion. These are governments do wrong actions, and we have to have the courage to call them out. So I love that you do that, Charlie. All right, but before we let you go, Charlie, the show is the revolution. So do you think that we need a political revolution? And what do you think is the one thing that you would do if you think we need one? If you could, right? That would make the difference in getting our democracy back and getting the government to represent us.
That's loaded. I think we need a political revolution. What I would say, and this is me putting on operative strategist hat and digital media professional hat, is what I would do is if I could flip a switch, it would be to flip the switch so that donors and donors, but everyone, voters, et cetera, had a overnight understanding of the digital media ecosystem that we are up against on the right. I don't think people quite understand the scale of the project that the conservative movement has built specifically online and in new media over the last decade. Obviously, TYT was very early to this, but you guys were ahead of the game, and unfortunately, most just did not follow in time, as you know. And so for me, it's less, I think I could talk about 1,000 policy changes I would like, or organizational differences I would like, but for me, it's actually about media infrastructure. I think where we are losing objectively is that we can't get our message out to enough people. Sometimes the message is actually correct. Sometimes I would argue it is right, but we are failing to reach people where they are, and that is not just because our messengers aren't the best, which they aren't. We need much better messengers too, but it's also because we have not had proper investment in digital media infrastructure like the conservatives had over the last decade. And I think until that we get that kind of investment and that kind of project built, we are going to continue to not see the kind of strides that we want, because we will not be able to get our message to reach the people that we desperately need.
And do you think we've particularly failed in reaching young men?
Of course, yes. Objectively, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, we could do a 24-hour episode on that. Yeah.
And so, I mean, look, obviously Democrats do relatively well with women for understandable reasons. They're for equal rights. They're for the right to control your own body, et cetera. Spend a lot of time and energy in that direction for logical reasons to make sure that no one's rights are taken away, right? Yeah. But it feels like the Democratic Party forgot about men. And so I guess since this is also in your field of expertise, so one more question then. What's your suggestion for how's the best way to get them back?
Again, I'll go backwards and forwards. I'll give a just medium answer, which is the whole reason I started making these videos was because when I got off the Kamala campaign and I wanted to, the last 3 weeks of the Kamala campaign, I was losing my mind. I was grateful to be there. I'm so glad I was there, but I could not believe, and it wasn't just me, that, to give credit to a lot of people in there. There was a lot of people in there who were pulling their hair out and saying, we can't believe what's going on here for 1,000 reasons. But one of them was messaging, content, paid media, creative, and how we were talking to men. The reason I started making videos was because when I got off of that campaign, I was asked to speak in a lot of panels. I was going to a lot of events. I was in 1,000 meetings. And frankly, I was almost always the only straight guy or straight white guy in those panels or in those meetings, which is fine. However, what I realized quickly was people were asking me for my opinion because I was the dude who liked to focus on talking to men and trying to get men back. And then I would give my ideas, which were very simple, which was just talk to them like humans, find messengers and use messengers that are authentic and actually speak to their everyday needs. We don't need to focus on sports betting. We don't need to focus on pornography. We can focus on the economic populist issues that are affecting every other demo, but we need to meet them where we are. And after I felt like I had 6 months of these conversations and nothing was happening, that's why I started yelling into my phone and recording it, because I felt like if nobody else is going to just do this, let me try. And my page is Shay Chuck, if folks want to look it up. I think one of the reasons it blew up so quickly was because there just is not a lot of guys who look like me talking about progressive issues and trying to break it down with an aim of talking to other men. There's a few really great guys out there like Josh Doss and Good Trouble and of course Hassan, but we are not busting at the seams with options for these kind of dudes talking about this stuff. So it's a simplified answer, but we just got to talk to men like humans. We can't try to cater our messaging to be about sports and make it funny and beer and drink. Just be a guy who talks to guys about the issues they care about, reach them where they are, and you'll start to get them back. That's my view.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely right. Okay, Charlie, tell folks where they can follow you one more time.
Totally. My handle is Shay or Ches Chuck, as you see it down there. You can find me on Instagram or TikTok. I know it says Twitter there, but I actually don't think my Twitter's up to date. So follow me on Instagram, TikTok. You'll see it's a lot of political, it's me breaking down politics, it's me ranting about everything that we're seeing at the national level, state level, local level. And yeah, I really enjoy it. I hope you guys follow me and like my content. And I appreciate, Cenk, I really appreciate you having me on. This was great. Again, I said to some folks before this was a bit of a full circle moment. I cannot emphasize enough how pivotal TYT was in my own political awakening in college. So this is awesome.
That's awesome. I appreciate you saying that, Charlie. And I love your videos. Everybody check out Charlie's videos. They're great, they're funny, they're smart. Charlie Goldenson, thanks for joining us, brother. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Cenk. Appreciate it.
Yep. All right, guys, I'm gonna do a bonus episode for you. We're off for Thanksgiving and that includes Friday. So I gotta give you guys a little bonus episode for the members. So if you're a member, hit the join button. And I'm gonna tell you something interesting. You know, I keep talking about how I grew up in a town that was, around half Jewish. I'm gonna tell you some stories from there. And so you get a little insight into how I grew up, okay? So hit the join button on YouTube, or if you're watching anywhere else, tyt.com/join. And I'll see you there in just a couple seconds.